The vanishing camper. In a forest so dense that the sun hesitated to penetrate its canopy, there was a remote campsite notorious for its swirling mists and stories that unsettled even the bravest of hearts. Jake, a man whose feet were firmly planted in the world of the tangible, laughed off local legends as he secured the last stake of his tent into the soft earth. Beside him, Mia, with her hair like the night and eyes full of stars, hummed a tune that seemed to belong to another time. Their first evening was spent under a sky embroidered with constellations, around a crackling fire that fought back the chill of the surrounding darkness. As they roasted marshmallows, Mia's voice danced with the wind as she recounted tales of hikers who stepped into the woods and slipped into legend. Jake, ever the skeptic, teased her about her fascination with the supernatural, attributing the disappearances to nothing more than wild animals and unfortunate missteps. However, that night, as the embers died and the lovers fell asleep, whispers crept into their campsite. They wove through the tent flaps, slithering between the couple, and for a moment, Mia's dreams were filled with voices that beckoned her to step outside. The following morning broke with a silence that pressed down on Jake's chest. He blinked, his eyes open to an empty tent and a pit of worry in his stomach. "Mia," he called, but his voice seemed smothered by the fog that clung to the fabric of their shelter. Outside, the world was a grayscale painting, the colors leached away by the mist. Mia was nowhere in sight. Jake's mind raced through logical explanations as he searched the campsite. It was when he saw the circle of stones, each one placed with an intention that bordered on the ceremonial, that his pulse began to quicken. In the center of the circle, the earth looked disturbed, as if something, or someone, had been taken by the soil itself. Panicked, Jake rummaged through their belongings, his hands closing around a leather-bound journal that certainly wasn't theirs. It was aged, the pages yellowed and the writing faded. The last entry, dated back to the 1970s, was of another camper, an avid hiker who had come to the park to face the wilderness but had instead encountered the whispers. The final words sent a chill through Jake's spine. The stones are more than stones, and the mist more than mist. As the hours ticked by, Jake's skepticism was whittled away by fear. He recalled Mia's words about the ancient rituals of the land. With each whisper that slithered in the air, he felt the presence of those who had vanished before, their voices a mosaic of warnings and pleas. The forest was a living, breathing entity, and it was indifferent to the fates of those who tread upon its roots. The sun dipped low, cowardly hiding behind the horizon as night approached. Jake sat in the center of the stone circle, the whispers now loud enough to be the echoes of past victims. They beckoned him to give in, to accept the forest's embrace. But Jake wasn't ready to become another ghost in the mist. He spoke into the whispering wind, telling Mia that he didn't believe the legends but that he believed in her. And as the night grew darker, he hoped that wherever she was, she could feel his determination. The video would fade to black here, leaving the viewers to wonder if Jake ever saw Mia again, if he himself escaped the forest, or if he too became part of the whispers that would haunt the next unwary campers. The silence following the story would be an invitation to let their imaginations fill in the gaps. The eerie atmosphere a lingering presence long after the screen had dimmed. The watcher in the woods. The woods were silent that evening, the kind of silence that feels like a held breath. Sarah, the park ranger whose green eyes were as much a part of the forest as the pines and the hawks, walked the edge of the lake where the fog lay like a thick blanket, undisturbed. She knew every trail, every clearing of this park, but even she felt a shiver of unease in this quiet. Paul, a fisherman whose memories were as knotted as the nets he cast, stood by the water, his gaze lost in the white mist. His brother had gone missing in these woods, and the only trace of him was a note as cryptic as a riddle, eyes that see through time, it read. The two had come together in a search that felt more like a ghost hunt, wandering through a landscape where every shadow could be a clue. Sarah, with her practical mind, did her best to keep the search grounded, focusing on the tangible, footprints, broken branches, disturbances in the underbrush. But then came the photograph. A picture Paul's brother had snapped the day he disappeared. Its film developed from an old camera found by the lakeside. They unrolled the photo to see a background of dense woods. But there in the foreground was a distorted silhouette, human-like yet stretched and twisted, as if the camera had captured something our eyes weren't meant to see. "That's no person," Paul muttered, his face the color of ash. Sarah studied the tracks they found later, large and clawed, leading into the heart of the forest. "Bears don't walk on two legs," she said, her voice a mix of wonder and fear. The tracks led them in a relentless march, deeper into the gloom, until the world was nothing but shadows and fog. Night fell like a curtain, swift and final. The fog grew thicker, the lake a mirror reflecting the heavy clouds above. Sarah and Paul set up a makeshift camp, the fire a small fortress of light against the closing dark. They spoke little, but their minds were loud with thoughts. Paul's memories of his brother clashed with Sarah's instincts, telling her that some mysteries were not meant to be solved. The forest seemed to watch them, a million unseen eyes in the dark, and the note's words haunted their thoughts, eyes that see through time. The fire crackled, a spark flying into the night, and then it came, the sound of something large moving just beyond the light's reach. They grasped for their flashlights, beams piercing the darkness, finding nothing. Then again, the sound, closer this time, a reality that was undeniable. "Something's out there," Sarah whispered, her hand on the bear spray at her belt. Paul nodded, his hand trembling as he clutched a fishing knife. "It's looking for something, or someone." The pursuit began as a game of cat and mouse, the entity in the woods toying with them, never seen, but always felt. It circled their camp, each round drawing closer, the air charged with a dread that sank into their bones. Sarah thought of all the animals she knew, trying to match the sounds to a creature, but nothing in her rational mind could explain this. The steps were too deliberate, the breathing too heavy, like the forest itself had come alive with a singular purpose: to watch, to stalk, to terrify. Paul stood back to back with Sarah, the two of them scanning the dark, jumping at every crackle and rustle. "We should never have come here," Paul said, the image of his brother's fate a weight in his heart. Then, in a moment of stillness, they felt it, a gaze upon them, oppressive and ancient. A shadow loomed at the edge of the firelight, tall and imposing, its outline blurred by the fog. Eyes glinted in the dark, reflecting the firelight like mirrors. "We need to go," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tremor of fear. Now, they grabbed their essentials and bolted. The entities pursued a cacophony of crashes through the underbrush. They didn't dare look back. The fire left to die as they fled through the night, guided by the dim glow of their flashlights and the adrenaline-fueled need to survive. The chase seemed to stretch for hours, until they broke free from the tree line, spilling onto the main road that cut through the park. They didn't stop running until they reached the ranger station, locking themselves inside. Dawn broke, revealing an untouched forest, the lake calm, and the fog lifted. Sarah and Paul emerged, their eyes wary and searching. There were no tracks, no signs of the entity that had hunted them. "What was it?" Paul asked, his voice hollow. "I don't know," Sarah replied. "But it's old, Paul. Older than any of us. And it's part of this land." They parted ways, but the forest remained, silent and watchful. Sarah continued her patrols, and Paul never stopped looking for his brother, the mystery unsolved, hanging in the air like the eternal fog of the lake. The story ended with a shot of the empty woods, the camera lingering on a pair of gleaming eyes that seemed to appear and disappear with the shift of the light, leaving the viewers with a feeling of unfinished business, of a predator still at large in the woods, and of the eternal presence of the watcher in the woods. The Lost Children. The dare was simple. Spend the night at the old campgrounds where stories were whispered of children's laughter heard in the dead of night. The local kids, fueled by bravado and the thrill of potential YouTube fame, were up to the challenge. Among them were Tasha, whose courage was as renowned as her fiery red hair, and Colin, with glasses perpetually perched on his nose and a backpack filled with ghost hunting gadgets he'd cobbled together. The campgrounds lay abandoned, a place where the wind sang through broken swing chains and the merry-go-round was silenced by rust. Legends said the land was cursed, a place of tragedy from years past, where children had vanished into the embrace of the forest, never to be seen again. As night wrapped its velvet cloak around the world, the teens set up their cameras, the glow of their screens a tether to the modern world. They laughed and joked, the eerie atmosphere a backdrop to their staged bravery. But as darkness deepened, so did the sense of isolation. It began with a creak, a slow, rhythmic groan of metal. The merry-go-round stirred to life, spinning as if pushed by unseen hands. Tasha and Colin exchanged nervous glances, their hearts beating a rapid tattoo. This was not part of the dare. The laughter came next, ethereal and light, a haunting melody that seemed to rise from the very earth. The teens' smiles faltered, their eyes wide as they searched the shadows for the source. But there was nothing but the flicker of their flashlights and the cold dread settling in their stomachs. They found the belongings scattered around the campground. A small, scuffed shoe, a tattered doll, a rusted toy truck. Items that spoke of innocence and play, long forgotten. Colin picked up a diary, its pages yellowed with age, the last entry a chilling prelude to disappearance. As the night wore on, One of their number, Alex, wandered away from the campfire's safety, his voice joining the laughter until it faded into the distance. Panic set in, the group frantically searching, calling his name into the indifferent night. Hours passed, and as suddenly as he had left, Alex returned, his eyes vacant, his memory of the past hours wiped clean as a slate. He spoke in riddles, his words a jumble of past and present. The forest around them seemed to close in, the trees whispering secrets in a language too ancient to understand. The laughter of the lost children grew louder, a siren call that tugged at their souls, inviting them to join the dance of shadows. Tasha, her fear a tight knot in her throat, took charge, her voice a command to stay together, to resist the call of the laughter. Colin, though shaking, set up his equipment, hoping to capture proof of the supernatural. The cameras flickered, screens glitching with static, as if the very air was charged with the power of the lost spirits. And then, the unthinkable. On the LCD screens, the faint images of children appeared, their outlines blurred, their eyes empty pools reflecting the moonlight. The teenagers were frozen, caught in the grip of a horror that was all too real. The ghosts of the children beckoned, their hands outstretched, their laughter a chilling lullaby that promised an end to all fears, an end to all things. Tasha felt a pull, a desire to step forward, to accept the ghostly invitation. But she resisted, her will a steel thread holding her to the world of the living. Colin, his gadgets now useless, clutched a camera to his chest, the recorded evidence of their encounter a weighty responsibility. The teens huddled together as the night stretched on, the laughter and visions an unending torment. They whispered promises to each other, pledges to leave at first light, to never speak of this night again. But the night was a chasm, and dawn a distant dream. The children's laughter wove through their thoughts, a melody of madness and sorrow. And when the first rays of sunlight finally pierced the darkness, the laughter faded, the visions dissolved, and the campgrounds were silent once more. The teens emerged from the night changed. They spoke little of what occurred, the pact of silence unspoken but understood. Their cameras told a tale of shadows and sounds, but the true depth of their fear remained their own. The story of the lost children lingered, a tragedy timeless and deep. And the laughter in the woods became a legend, a warning to those who would dare the darkness. For some things are lost forever, and some places hold on to the sins of the past with a grip that not even daylight can loosen. The unseen forest. The park was a green labyrinth of twisting paths and ancient trees, a place where even the sunlight seemed to lose its way. But it was the anomalies that drew Helen, a scientist with an ironclad skepticism and a passion for unraveling the mysteries of the natural world. Her assistant, Greg, a recent graduate with a penchant for tech, followed her like a shadow, documenting every unexplainable magnetic spike and glitch on their equipment. They had heard the rumors, compasses that spun wildly, cell phones that drained in minutes, and watches that stopped dead. It was an ideal anomaly to study, unexplained phenomena ripe for a rational explanation. But the trail they followed seemed almost resentful of their intrusion. Overgrown branches snatching at their clothes, roots rising up to trip their steps. Their equipment, state-of-the-art and reliable in any other setting, flickered and warbled, screens freezing before displaying numbers that made no sense. Greg's camera, a lifeline to capture their findings, shut down with a whine despite its full battery. But it was the force, unseen but undeniably felt, that transformed their mission from one of discovery to one of survival. It began as a pressure on their backs, a gentle push urging them forward, guiding them off the marked trails and deeper into the park's untamed heart. Helen, ever the scientist, tried to rationalize the sensation. It must be a shift in the magnetic field, she posited, affecting our nervous system. Greg nodded, but his eyes betrayed his fear, darting to the shadows between the trees as if expecting them to come alive. Then there was the apparition. It flickered at the edge of their vision, a wisp of white, like mist shaped like a human. When they turned to look, it vanished, only to reappear farther down the path, an ethereal guide beckoning them on. They found the grave at twilight, a simple stone half swallowed by the earth, its inscription worn away by time. The ghostly figure stood over it, pointing. And with a blink, it was gone, leaving a chill hanging in the air. Helen knelt by the stone, her instruments silent now, as if they too held their breath. Greg looked around, the fading light casting long shadows. "Do you think it's true?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper, "about the witch?" The legend was as old as the town itself. A woman accused, tried, and executed for witchcraft, buried in unconsecrated ground somewhere within the park's expanse. They said she cursed the land as she died, her rage a blight that would linger through the ages. As the darkness closed in, so too did the force. It was no longer just a suggestion, it was insistent, desperate. It tugged at Helen's hair, clawed at Greg's back, leaving red welts that burned to the touch. "We need to leave," Helen said, her voice steady despite the panic that gripped her. She had come for answers, but some questions, she realized, were best left unasked. They stumbled back through the underbrush, the force a malevolent presence at their heels. It seemed to whisper through the leaves, a language of anger and grief that had no words, only emotions that seared the soul. Greg's camera sprung to life of its own accord, its screen filled with static that coalesced into a face, eyes hollow, mouth open in a silent scream. He dropped it with a shout, and it shattered against the ground, the image vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. They ran, branches tearing at their clothes, roots eager to trip them. The park was alive, a beast with countless arms reaching out to drag them back to the witch's grave. Helen's rational mind reeled, unable to comprehend the breach of every law of physics she held dear. The trail seemed to stretch into infinity, each turn bringing them no closer to safety. And when they finally broke free, bursting onto the main road with lungs burning and hearts pounding, the forest behind them fell silent, the curse satisfied, for now. Back in the safety of their lab, Helen pored over the data, her eyes dark with exhaustion and something else, fear. The numbers told a story of something powerful and angry, a force that defied every explanation. Greg nursed his wounds, the marks on his back a testament to the park's dark history. They had gone in search of truth, armed with science, but what they found was something beyond understanding, a force that was both less and more than a ghost. The story of their encounter spread, a new chapter in the legend of the witch's curse. But for Helen and Greg, the park was no longer just a research site. It was a reminder that not all forces can be seen, that some things refuse to be explained, and that some graves are best left undisturbed. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls outside her window, Helen wonders if the force they felt was the witch's anger or her sorrow, and whether the land would ever be free from the echo of her despair. The Whispering Cave, the discovery was heralded as the find of the century. Beneath the sprawling roots of the park, a network of caves stretched like the veins of the earth itself, its walls etched with the stories of a time long past. Carter, whose life was spent charting the uncharted, felt the familiar thrill of adventure thrumming in his veins. Beside him, Lydia, with her keen anthropological mind, was eager to decode the history of the ancient artwork. The cave entrance yawned wide, a portal to the subterranean world that time had forgotten. The air was cool and damp, clinging to their skin as they descended. Their headlamps pierced the darkness, casting long, dancing shadows against the cavern walls. The paintings were extraordinary, reds and blacks still vibrant with life, depicting scenes of hunting, gathering, and rituals that whispered of the arcane. But as they ventured further, the weight of the earth above seemed to press down upon them, a physical reminder of the descent not just into the cave, but into the bowels of history itself. The silence of the cave was pure and complete, save for the occasional drip of water and the soft shuffle of their footsteps. Then the whispers began, soft and insidious, slithering into their minds like a breeze through dead leaves. At first, they believed it to be an echo of their own breath or the trickling of underground streams. But the whispers grew clearer, words in a language that Lydia's educated ear identified as archaic and long dead. Carter shook his head in disbelief. "Cave acoustics," he murmured, trying to convince himself. Yet, when he closed his eyes, images danced behind his lids, people clad in animal skins, firelight flickering, and shadows writhing on the cave walls. Lydia, too, confessed to seeing visions of a past that felt too real to be mere imagination. The whispers became insistent, urging them onward, deeper into the labyrinth. Each chamber revealed more of the story, and with every step, the line between hallucination and reality blurred. In one haunting tableau, the figures in the paintings seemed to move, acting out a ritual of life and death, a cycle unbroken by time. Lydia reached out, her hand hovering over the ancient mineral paints as if to touch the past itself. "It's not just a cave," Lydia said, her voice trembling. "It's a chronicle, a warning." The ultimate chamber was vast, larger than any they had encountered, with a ceiling lost to the shadows. In the center stood an altar, stone worn smooth by countless hands. Upon it lay a scattering of objects that had no place in the ancient setting. A plastic lighter, a modern watch, a camera, their presence a stark intrusion. "This shouldn't be here," Carter said, his headlamp illuminating the incongruity of the items among the primitive tools and offerings. The whispers crescendoed into voices, commanding them to take their place in the history of the cave. Carter and Lydia found themselves compelled to obey, hands outstretched towards the artifacts as if to offer themselves to the legacy of the cavern. But Lydia paused, the anthropologist within her awakening from the trance. "We're part of it now," she whispered, "part of the cycle. Don't you see? This is how it continues." She snatched her hand back as if burned, her headlamp swinging wildly, casting monstrous shadows. Carter, too, stepped back, the explorer's instinct to survive overpowering the cave's lure. They fled, the whispers chasing them, a cacophony of ancient voices raised in anger. The visions assaulted them, prehistoric predators stalking their steps, specters of past worshippers reaching for them with ethereal hands. The journey back was a battle against both the cave and their own minds, each step an act of defiance against the abyss that beckoned them. When they emerged into the daylight, the world seemed too bright, too real. They sat at the entrance of the cave, the sun warming their chilled skin, the whispers finally silenced. But the cave had marked them. In the days that followed, they could not shake the feeling of being observed, the sensation of unseen eyes upon them. The cave called to them in their dreams, a siren song that promised secrets and terror in equal measure. The items on the altar were analyzed, found to belong to those who had gone missing in the park over the years, each disappearance unexplained until now. Carter and Lydia knew the truth, but who would believe it? The cave was a keeper of secrets, a whisperer of destinies not to be understood, but endured. They never returned to the cave, but sometimes, in the stillness of the night, they would hear it, a whisper carried on the wind, a reminder of the weight of history and the lure of the abyss, of a story that was theirs now, forever etched in the darkness beneath the earth. The man out of time. Dean's hammer fell with the rhythm of routine. Each struck a note in the symphony of renovation. The park's visitor center was a shell of its former self, gutted and waiting for the new skin of progress. Dust danced in the beams of sunlight that breached the plastic sheeting over the windows, the air thick with the scent of sawdust and old secret. Elise arrived like a whisper of the past, her eyes bright with the curiosity of a historian. She was there to ensure that the renovation didn't trample on history. While Dean saw walls to tear down, Elise saw stories to preserve. It was on the third day of work, as Dean pried off the paneling of a forgotten corner, that he found the door, a relic hidden by time, its paint chipped and handle dulled. With a glance at Elise, who nodded eagerly, he turned the handle and stepped into yesterday. The room was a time capsule, undisturbed, a layer of dust like a blanket over everything. Papers, a hat, a watch, all belonged to a man who had vanished in the park's embrace decades ago. Dean picked up the watch, and a chill skittered down his spine. Elise approached, her breath caught between excitement and reverence. "This is his," she said softly, referring to the missing man. "He's like a legend around here." But as Dean wound the watch, the world twisted. The modern chaos of the renovation site melted away, replaced by the park visitor center in its heyday. People bustled around, their clothes from another era. Dean was a specter there, unseen, feeling the echo of the missing man's last moments. He snapped back to the present with a gasp, the watch ticking ominously in his hand. Elise stared at him, her brow furrowed. "Dean, are you all right?" He could only nod, the images seared into his mind. As they sorted through the room, the phenomenon grew. Dean slipped in and out of the past like a record skipping, each time with more intensity. The objects began to behave strangely, moving when they were not touched, aligning to form a map of the park as it once was. Elise watched, her historian's skepticism warring with the evidence of her eyes. It was during one of Dean's slips that he saw it, the missing man, terrified, running from something unseen. Dean followed, the past a labyrinth around him. When he returned to the present, the map was complete, a path drawn by the hand of fate. "I have to follow it," Dean said, a certainty in his voice that scared Elise more than the moving objects. She tried to stop him, but Dean was a man possessed. He followed the path, Elise trailing behind, her pleas lost in the wind. The park transformed around Dean, time peeling back like layers of an onion, each step taking him further from the now. The last slip was absolute. Dean stood in the park, the missing man before him, their eyes meeting in a moment of impossible understanding. Then the man was gone, and Dean was alone, his clothes now vintage, his face unknown to the modern world. Back in the present, Elise found the map. The objects, the room, but not Dean. The park had taken another, the cycle complete. She could feel Dean's presence in the whispers of the trees, a déjà vu that left her trembling. The visitor center was left untouched, the renovation halted. It became a shrine to the missing, to Dean, to the man out of time whose fate he had shared. Time in the park was a circle, a serpent eating its tail, and Dean was now part of the legend, a story to be told by those who followed, each word a monument to the man who slipped through time. The circle of stones, the meadow was a swath of green against the dense browns and greens of the forest, under a sky that held more secrets than it did stars. Leonard had always scoffed at the stories, tales spun by the over-imaginative and those seeking the mysteries of the cosmos on Earth. But Rosa, with eyes wide and mind open, believed that the meadow, known for the strange lights that danced above it, held answers to ancient questions. Together, they stepped into the meadow as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of purple and orange. Leonard's equipment beeped and whirred, a symphony of skepticism aimed at the heavens. Rosa's hand brushed against the rough edge of a stone, one of many that made a near-perfect circle in the heart of the meadow. The first loop was subtle, a sudden chill, a sense of vertigo, and then a feeling of intense déjà vu. Leonard's watch spun backwards for a moment before righting itself. Electromagnetic fields, he muttered, eyeing his instruments. But Rosa felt it in her bones, a displacement, a hiccup in the flow of time. With each loop, the sky above the meadow lit up, colors unseen by the normal eye streaking across the stars. Leonard's disbelief waned as his rational explanations withered in the face of the inexplicable light show. The stones seemed to hum with energy, a vibration that Rosa felt deep in her chest. Each reset sharpened the details. There were shapes in the lights, structures, and patterns that beckoned them to look closer, understand more. Rosa's excitement was a tangible thing, while Leonard's growing anxiety clawed at his throat. "We're not meant to see this," he hissed during one iteration, but Rosa was determined. "I need to know," she insisted, touching the stones again, initiating another loop. And then, without warning, they stood not in the meadow but aboard something else, somewhere else. The lights were all around them, and beings, creatures of light and thought rather than flesh and blood, communicated in bursts of emotion and knowledge. Leonard's instruments were silent, useless relics in the face of such advanced existence. Rosa wept with joy at the confirmation of her beliefs, while Leonard could only stand in awe, his life's work a mere shadow of this new reality. But as quickly as it happened, it was over. The meadow returned, the night sky once more a blanket of darkness, the stones silent and cold to the touch. The loops had ceased, the encounter ended, but the questions multiplied like stars in the universe. They left the meadow, the stones, and the lights behind, their experience a shared secret that burned in their chests. The cosmos had touched them, changed them, and the search for truth had never been more urgent. The meadow remained, quiet and unassuming, the circle of stones a doorway to the heavens that only opened for those who truly sought to understand. Leonard and Rosa had touched the unknown, and the echoes of that touch would resonate through their lives forever. The mimic in the heart of the park, where trails twisted like threads through the fabric of the wilderness, Anna and Bella ventured to honor a memory. They were identical in looks, bound by blood, but it was grief that clung to them like the shadows of the trees. They had come to commemorate a friend, lost to the whispers of the forest a year prior. Some said it was the woods that took her, snatching away her voice until only an echo remained. Now, they sought closure, not knowing that the woods held a listener, an entity that feasted on voice and visage alike. The air was still as they walked, but the silence was a cacophony to their strained senses. They spoke little, each lost in a labyrinth of their own sorrows, until the forest itself seemed to speak back. Anna, the voice was Bella's. Yet Bella hadn't spoken. It beckoned from a fork in the path, a whisper of invitation. Confusion creased Anna's face as she looked to her sister, who shook her head, a denial that deepened the mystery. Bella heard it next, her own name called out in Anna's tones, tugging her gaze toward the underbrush, where shadows danced with possibilities. They clutched each other, fear a tangible thing between them. The mimicry was cruel, splitting them with deceit. Anna ran after the voice that wore her sister's timbre, while Bella chased the echo of her own syllables. The paths they followed were arteries, and the heart of the woods pulsed with malevolent life. They saw each other, or so they thought. Anna faced Bella, her eyes pleading, but the words that spilled from her twin were soured, twisted with anger and accusation. Bella recoiled from Anna, or the thing that took her shape, hurling words laced with bitterness and blame. The forest was alive with their fears, the entity drawing sustenance from their pain, feeding off the guilt they harbored for surviving when their friend did not. It wore their faces, their voices, as easily as one might wear a cloak, and it sought to drive a wedge of madness between them. Night fell, a shroud over the sun, and with it came clarity. They realized the deception, understanding that trust was the only light that could pierce the darkness. They had to believe in each other, in the bond that not even death could sever. The final confrontation was a storm of emotion and reality. The mimic, a tempest that raged with voices stolen from the past. It conjured the image of their lost friend, a specter that wore her smile like a mask. "Can't you save me?" the mimic pleaded, a dagger thrust into their hearts with each word. But Anna and Bella stood firm, their resolve a bastion against the tempest. They spoke in unison, a chant that was a promise, an affirmation of life and remembrance. "You are gone, but not forgotten, and we will not yield to shadows." With those words, the mimic faltered, its illusions dissolving like mist before the rising sun. It was their acceptance, their release of guilt, that weakened it, leaving behind only the echo of their defiance. As dawn painted the sky with strokes of pink and gold, Anna and Bella emerged from the woods, weary but unbroken. They had faced the mimic, an embodiment of their own torment, and they had prevailed. The trails remained, winding paths in a forest that whispered with voices of the past. But the twins knew that some echoes were meant to fade, and some memories to be carried with love, not sorrow. And the mimic, a creature of grief and regret, had no place in the story they would continue to write. The stolen night. Zach's camera was his window to the world, a lens through which he captured the mundane and the magnificent alike. Naomi, with her curious mind and eager eyes, was his perfect companion in the quest for the extraordinary. The viewpoint in the park, famous for its sunset panoramas, had become their focus, but not for the light that bathed the hills in gold. They were drawn by the whispers of time lost, of a 5-hour void when the night devoured minutes and hours alike. As dusk painted the sky with streaks of orange and purple, Zach's camera stood vigilant on its tripod, its eye open and unblinking. Naomi, notebook in hand, jotted down thoughts and observations, her pen dancing across the pages. They laughed, dismissing the stories as figments of overactive imaginations, a challenge to be unraveled. But as the stars claimed the heavens, a stillness enveloped them. The night grew thick, a tapestry of shadows that seemed almost alive, pulsing with the heartbeat of the unknown. And then, nothing. The morning greeted them with confusion, the sunlight mocking their disorientation. They woke entwined on the cold ground, symbols that neither recognized inked upon their palms. The camera, its battery drained, offered no explanations, and their memories held only emptiness. Trepidation clawed at Zach as he reviewed the footage, Naomi peering over his shoulder. The screen showed them at the viewpoint, hours passing in a silent vigil, their bodies statuesque, eyes fixed on the celestial dance above. But they were not alone. Figures, darker than the night, stood in a circle around them, indistinct yet unmistakably there. Naomi's breath hitched, a symphony of fear and fascination. Their time hadn't been stolen. It had been claimed, an offering to the shadowy sentinels that now haunted their every thought. As they watched the last frame, a figure detached from the darkness, its form humanoid but wrong, proportions twisted in subtle, unsettling ways. It stepped toward the camera, a hand reaching out to the lens, and then blackness. The after effects of that night were subtle yet undeniable. Zach found himself waking at 3 a.m., drawn to the windows to gaze at the sky, an act he couldn't explain. Naomi hummed a melody that neither had ever heard, a tune that seemed to echo from the depths of the earth. They returned to the viewpoint by day, the sun a comforting companion, but the symbols on their hands remained, a brand of their encounter. The ground held no sign of their nocturnal visitors, only the wild grass swaying in the breeze. Whispers followed them in the streets, laughter tickled their ears in empty rooms, and the symbols itched, a constant reminder of the night they had lost. Zach watched the footage again, pausing on the shadowy figure, its hand reaching out. He realized it wasn't just reaching for the camera, it was reaching for them, through time and space, a connection unbroken by daylight. As they slept, they dreamed of stars and voids, of silhouettes against the sky, each dream a piece of the puzzle they no longer wished to solve. They knew now that some things were beyond the realm of cameras and notebooks, lying in wait where curiosity dared to tread. The viewpoint remained picturesque, a canvas of natural beauty, but at night it held a secret, a slice of time forever out of reach, stolen by the watchers who claimed the darkness as their own. The park's heart, the wilds of the park were Avery's second home. Each tree a familiar landmark, every whispering wind a known voice. Marco, on the other hand, was a tapestry of nerves and excitement, his boots still clean, his eyes wide with the raw beauty of nature. They ventured beyond where the trails dared to sketch, into a realm where compasses spun aimlessly and the brave felt fear. Their mission was to find a hiker, one who had laughed in the face of caution and had been swallowed by the green abyss. Avery had seen this before, people disappearing as if the park had inhaled them, leaving no trace but the echo of their steps. The deeper they ventured, the thicker the air became, a humid grasp that clung to their skin. Birds fell silent as they progressed, and the gentle rustle of wildlife turned to a heavy stillness. And then, without warning, the sun vanished from the sky, not set nor obscured by clouds, but erased as if it had never been. In the gloom, the forest transformed. The trees contorted into grotesque silhouettes, and the path beneath their feet pulsed softly, a heartbeat of the earth that was out of sync with their own. There, Marco pointed to a glade where the ground itself undulated, a living, breathing mass that throbbed with a sickly cadence. It was veined and slick, an organic entity that seemed as ancient as the earth itself. Roots extended from it like tentacles, burrowing into the soil, the trees intertwining with the very fabric of the park. The wildlife had changed, too. Deer with too many eyes watched them from behind twisted trunks, and birds with scales instead of feathers circled above, a guard of honor for the park's dark heart. Avery reached for the radio, but static met his call. Marco's hand hovered above the mass, a morbid curiosity glinting in his eyes, but Avery knocked it aside. "We don't touch the unknown so carelessly," he warned. They knew then that the hiker they sought was beyond their reach, claimed by the park's heart, a sacrifice or a convert to its arcane rituals. The decision to leave, to conceal the truth of their find, weighed on them. To speak of it would invite chaos, questions that would lead others to this unnatural pulsing core. The park had to be preserved, its secrets kept, its heart beating in the dark, unseen. They emerged from the wilderness with concocted tales of trails searched and the sad shake of the head that meant another soul lost. But the sun had returned, a glaring eye that bore into them, an accusation for the tale they wove. Sleep eluded Avery, his dreams invaded by the mass, its pulse a drumbeat that called to him, urging him to return, to join the dance of the deformed wildlife. Marco grew distant, his once eager gaze dulled by the shadows of what they'd seen. The park continued to breathe, to consume, its heart beating a rhythm that thrummed beneath the surface. Avery and Marco, bound by their secret, watched the trees with wary eyes, knowing they stood at the edge of a deeper world, where humanity was but a visitor and the park was a living entity, timeless and voracious. And sometimes, in the depths of the night, if one listened closely, they could hear the heartbeat of the park, a pulse that promised wonders and horrors intertwined. A song of the earth that sang of the ancient, sentient heart that lay hidden in its depths. The whispering pines. The night was thick with darkness as Sarah and Jackson made their way deeper into the remote, dense forest. Moonlight filtered through the dense canopy of trees, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance with malevolent intent. The air was heavy with humidity, and the silence was oppressive, broken only by the crunch of leaves under their boots. Sarah, a fearless biologist with a penchant for exploring the unknown, led the way with a determined stride. Her flashlight cut through the inky blackness, revealing gnarled tree roots and the twisted undergrowth. Jackson, the skeptical journalist who had reluctantly agreed to accompany her, trailed behind, his skepticism steadily giving way to unease. As they ventured further into the woods, Sarah's excitement was palpable. She had heard rumors of cryptid sightings in this very forest, creatures said to be the stuff of nightmares. She had spent months researching these legends and was convinced that the evidence was here, waiting to be discovered. But the forest had other plans. As the minutes turned into hours, the atmosphere grew increasingly unnerving. The trees seemed to close in around them, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Sarah and Jackson began to hear faint, chilling whispers that seemed to come from the very trees themselves. The whispers were elusive, like the softest of sighs, impossible to pinpoint. "What's that?" Jackson whispered, his voice trembling. He shone his flashlight toward a cluster of trees, but the source of the whispers remained elusive. "I don't know," Sarah replied, her excitement now tinged with apprehension. "But we're getting closer. I can feel it." They followed the eerie whispers deeper into the forest, their hearts pounding in their chests. It was then that they stumbled upon it, a set of strange footprints in the soft forest floor. They were unlike any tracks they had ever seen. a bizarre blend of animal and human features. Jackson knelt down, his fingers tracing the peculiar indentations. What kind of creature could make these? He wondered aloud. Sarah examined the footprints, her mind racing. I'm not sure, but this is exactly what we've been looking for. We need to keep going. With newfound determination, they pressed on, the whispers growing more insistent, as though beckoning them deeper into the forest's heart. Eventually, the trail led them to a small clearing, where an old, weathered cabin stood, barely visible through the thick foliage. As they approached the cabin, they were startled by the sudden appearance of an enigmatic figure. Old Man Tom, as he introduced himself, was a hermit who had lived in these woods for decades. His gnarled face and piercing eyes held a wisdom that seemed to stretch beyond time. You shouldn't be here, Old Man Tom warned, his voice a low, raspy whisper. Sarah stepped forward, her curiosity overcoming her fear. We're here to investigate the cryptids, the creatures rumored to dwell in these woods. Do you know anything about them? Old Man Tom's eyes narrowed, and he let out a weary sigh. There are things in these woods that are best left undisturbed. But if you must know, there's a guardian here, a guardian and a curse. The old man's words sent shivers down their spines. He recounted tales of a terrifying forest entity that protected these woods, a creature born from myth and madness. It was said that this guardian could manipulate reality itself, and those who sought to uncover its secrets were doomed to face its wrath. As the night wore on, Sarah and Jackson listened to Old Man Tom's unsettling stories, their sense of dread intensifying with each passing moment. But they were determined to uncover the truth, to capture evidence of the cryptid that had haunted their dreams for so long. With Old Man Tom reluctantly as their guide, they delved even deeper into the forest, their flashlights piercing the darkness like beacons of defiance. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as though the very trees were urging them to turn back. And then they saw it, a grotesque, shadowy figure looming before them, a nightmarish fusion of human and beast, its eyes glowing with malevolence. It was the guardian of the woods, the very creature they had come to find. Their hearts pounded in their chests as they confronted the entity, their terror threatening to consume them. It moved with unnatural speed, a blur of darkness and rage, and it seemed to exist on the very cusp of reality itself. In a final, heart-pounding confrontation, Sarah and Jackson fought for their lives against the relentless guardian of the woods. Their flashlights flickered, casting erratic beams of light that revealed glimpses of the creature's grotesque form. With every ounce of strength and determination, they pushed back against the cryptid, refusing to be mere victims of its curse. The guardian howled in anguish as the first light of dawn began to break through the trees, its power waning with the fading darkness. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the guardian of the woods vanished into the early morning mist, leaving behind a sense of eerie calm. Sarah and Jackson, battered and shaken, knew that they had witnessed something beyond the realm of human understanding. As they made their way back to the cabin, they couldn't help but wonder if the cryptid they had encountered was a guardian or a harbinger of doom. One thing was certain, the line between myth and reality had blurred in those deep, remote woods, and they had glimpsed a truth more terrifying than anything they had ever imagined. The unseen predator. The full moon hung low in the fog-shrouded sky, casting an eerie glow over the ancient forest. Its silver light filtered through the dense canopy of ancient trees, creating shifting patterns of shadow and illumination on the forest floor. A heavy mist clung to the underbrush, muffling the sounds of the night and adding to the sense of isolation that hung in the air. Emma, a nature photographer with a passion for capturing the beauty of the wild, crouched low among the ferns, her camera poised and ready. Max, her skeptical friend, stood nearby, arms crossed and eyes darting around nervously. They had ventured deep into the heart of the forest, hoping to capture rare images of elusive wildlife under the ethereal light of the full moon. As the minutes turned into hours, Emma's determination was unwavering. Her camera shutter clicked softly, capturing the serene beauty of a deer as it grazed among the trees. But Max's unease grew with each passing moment. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone in the ancient woods. Are you sure about this? Max finally spoke up, his voice tinged with anxiety. This place gives me the creeps. There's something not right about it. Emma glanced up from her camera, a hint of frustration in her eyes. Max, you worry too much. This is the perfect opportunity to capture some incredible shots. Just relax and enjoy the beauty of the forest. Max reluctantly nodded but kept his senses on high alert. As they continued their expedition, he couldn't help but notice strange symbols carved into the trees. Symbols he couldn't decipher, etched in a language long forgotten. "Emma, take a look at this," Max called out, pointing to one of the cryptic symbols. "What do you think these markings mean?" Emma joined Max by the tree, studying the symbols with a furrowed brow. "I have no idea. Maybe they're just old carvings from past visitors." But Max couldn't shake the feeling that they were somehow significant, that they held a deeper, ominous meaning. As he examined the symbols, a chilling sensation crept over him, as if an icy breath were whispering against the nape of his neck. "Did you feel that?" Max asked, his voice quivering. Emma looked at him, puzzled. "Feel what?" Max shook his head, unable to put his unease into words. "Never mind. Let's just keep moving." They ventured further into the forest, but Max's anxiety deepened. He had the uncanny sensation of being watched, of unseen eyes fixed upon him. And then, as they reached a particularly dense thicket of trees, the invisible presence closed in around them. "Emma," Max hissed, "we need to leave, now." But before they could react, a bone-chilling breath brushed against the back of Max's neck, causing his skin to crawl. He spun around, but there was nothing there, just the dense fog and the ancient trees. Panic gripped Max as he stumbled backward, his heart pounding in his chest. "We're not alone, Emma. Something's here with us." Emma's eyes widened with alarm, and she lowered her camera, finally sensing the fear in Max's voice. "Okay, let's go back to the car." But as they turned to leave, a deep, guttural growl rumbled through the forest, freezing them in their tracks. The unseen predator had revealed itself, and it was closing in on them. They broke into a run, branches and thorns scratching at their skin as they fled through the dense underbrush. The creature pursued them, its chilling breath hot on their necks. It was invisible, impossible to see, but its presence was all too real. In their frantic flight, they stumbled upon a small, weathered cabin hidden deep within the forest. It was the residence of Elias, a reclusive forest ranger known for his knowledge of the woods and its secrets. Desperation forced them to seek shelter within. Elias greeted them with a mixture of surprise and concern. He listened intently as they recounted their harrowing encounter with the unseen predator. Elias's face grew grim as they spoke, and he nodded gravely. "You've encountered the forest's guardian," Elias explained, his voice filled with dread. "An ancient and malevolent entity that can only be sensed by the chilling breath it exhales. It is said to protect the forest from intruders." Max and Emma exchanged worried glances. "Can you help us?" Emma asked. Elias hesitated for a moment before nodding. "I can try, but you must do exactly as I say if you want to survive this night." As the full moon continued to cast its eerie glow, Elias shared his knowledge of the unseen predator. He explained that the creature was a part of the forest itself, an entity that had existed since time immemorial. It could manipulate the very air, making itself invisible to the naked eye. Their only chance of survival, Elias said, was to trick the predator into revealing itself. He handed them small vials of a special powder, a mixture of herbs and substances that could disrupt the creature's ability to remain hidden. With trembling hands, Max and Emma applied the powder to themselves, their hearts racing as they awaited the unseen predator's next move. And then it came, a cold, chilling breath on the back of their necks, closer than ever before. Max and Emma exchanged a nervous glance before simultaneously turning to face the source of their terror. As the creature's invisibility wavered, it revealed its grotesque form, a nightmarish fusion of human and beast, its eyes glowing with malevolence. Max and Emma held their breath, cameras at the ready, and captured images that defied belief. The creature howled in agony as the powder disrupted its cloaking ability. It thrashed and snarled, its form flickering in and out of existence. But Max and Emma continued to snap photos, documenting the creature's existence for the world to see. Finally, with one last wail of defeat, the unseen predator retreated into the depths of the forest, vanishing into the darkness from which it had come. Max and Emma collapsed to the forest floor, their hearts still pounding with adrenaline. They had survived the night, but they knew that the unseen predator would forever haunt their memories. As they made their way back to civilization, they couldn't help but ponder the fragility of human perception and the terror of the unknown. The forest had shown them that even in the darkest corners of the world, there were mysteries beyond comprehension, waiting to be discovered or feared. The echoing howl. Twilight descended upon the misty, haunted forest, casting long, eerie shadows among the ancient trees. The air hung heavy with an unsettling silence, broken only by the distant cawing of crows. It was a place where darkness and mystery intertwined, and where the line between reality and nightmare blurred into a chilling tapestry of fear. Siblings Mia and Jake ventured into the heart of the forest, the evening mist enveloping them as they followed the winding path. Their flashlights pierced the gloom, illuminating the gnarled roots that seemed to reach out like skeletal fingers. They were on a quest to uncover the secrets that had shrouded the forest for generations, a journey that would soon turn into a desperate fight for survival. As the forest swallowed them deeper, Mia felt an unease settle in her chest. The bond between siblings was strong, and they had always been each other's protectors. But the eerie atmosphere was starting to erode her sense of security. "Jake, do you feel that?" she whispered, her voice quivering with uncertainty. Jake nodded, his flashlight trembling in his hand. "Yeah, it's like the forest is watching us, Mia." The siblings quickened their pace, their steps echoing through the stillness. But as they ventured further, an eerie howl pierced the silence, sending a shiver down their spines. The sound was chilling, a lamentation that seemed to echo their deepest fears. "What was that?" Mia asked, her heart racing. Jake shook his head, his eyes darting nervously. "I don't know, but we need to keep moving." Unbeknownst to them, their decision to press forward had dire consequences. As they walked deeper into the forest's heart, they stumbled upon a moss-covered stone, and Jake tripped and fell. In the confusion, they became separated, and Mia's desperate calls for her brother went unanswered. Tears welled up in her eyes as she frantically scanned the mist-shrouded trees. But Jake was nowhere to be found. Panic threatened to consume her as she realized the forest had swallowed him whole. Meanwhile, Jake found himself in a different part of the forest, his flashlight flickering ominously. Fear gnawed at him as he tried to retrace his steps, but the fog had transformed the once familiar landscape into an unrecognizable labyrinth. As the siblings struggled to reunite, the chilling howls grew louder, closer, and more relentless, echoing through the haunted forest like a relentless specter of doom. They could feel the cryptid's presence, lurking just out of sight, driven by a relentless pursuit that sent shivers down their spines. In the depths of the forest, Mia encountered a mysterious woodsman named Ethan. He emerged from the shadows, his presence unsettling yet strangely comforting. He offered to help her find Jake, but there was something in his eyes, a darkness that hinted at secrets best left buried. "I saw your brother earlier," Ethan said, his voice soft and coaxing. "He's not far from here. I can lead you to him." Mia's relief was palpable, and she followed Ethan deeper into the forest. But as they walked, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The forest seemed to grow even darker around them, and the eerie howls continued to haunt her. Meanwhile, Jake encountered his own guide in the form of a shadowy figure, cloaked in mist and darkness. The figure whispered promises of safety and salvation, and Jake, desperate to escape the relentless pursuit of the cryptid, followed without question. As the siblings were led deeper into the forest, the chilling howls seemed to close in around them, surrounding them with a sense of impending doom. The mist thickened, obscuring their vision, and they felt as though they were trapped in a never-ending nightmare. Finally, Mia and Jake were reunited in the heart of the forest, their relief palpable. But their joy was short-lived as they realized the true nature of their guides. Ethan and the shadowy figure were not saviors, but malevolent forces with their own sinister motives. Ethan's eyes glinted with malice as he revealed his true intentions. "You see, I too have been pursued by the cryptid for years, and now, by offering you as bait, I can finally escape its grasp." The shadowy figure that had led Jake whispered malevolent promises of power and freedom, but in return, it demanded his soul. Desperation and fear gripped the siblings as they realized the depth of the betrayal. With no other options, they fled from their guides, plunging deeper into the haunted forest. The cryptid's howls grew more relentless, a symphony of terror that seemed to reverberate through the very trees themselves. It was closing in on them, its presence becoming suffocating. In a final, spine-tingling climax, Mia and Jake found themselves in a deadly game of hide-and-seek with the relentless cryptid. It stalked them through the mist, its grotesque form flickering in and out of existence, its eyes burning with malevolence. As they eluded its grasp time and again, they realized the truth. The cryptid was a manifestation of the darkness within the forest itself, a guardian and a harbinger of doom. With every ounce of strength and determination, Mia and Jake fought back against the relentless cryptid, refusing to become victims of the forest's darkness. They used their flashlights to illuminate its form, capturing images that would forever document their harrowing ordeal. In a final, heart-pounding showdown, they cornered the cryptid, its unearthly howls filling the air. With a blinding flash of light, they forced it to reveal its true form, a nightmarish fusion of human and beast. The cryptid howled in anguish, its power waning with the fading twilight. It thrashed and snarled, but Mia and Jake continued to shine their flashlights, refusing to be consumed by the darkness. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the cryptid vanished into the mist, leaving behind an eerie calm. Mia and Jake collapsed to the forest floor, their hearts still pounding with adrenaline. They had survived the night, but the echoes of their harrowing ordeal would forever haunt their memories. As they made their way back to civilization, they couldn't help but ponder the fragility of human perception and the terror of the unknown. The forest had shown them that even in the darkest corners of the world, there were mysteries beyond comprehension, waiting to be discovered or feared. The eyes in the shadows. A moonlit night had draped the ancient forest in an ethereal glow, casting eerie silhouettes among the towering trees. Emily, a dedicated forest researcher with an insatiable curiosity, led the way, her flashlight cutting through the thick fog that hung like a shroud over the woods. Beside her, Mark, her skeptical colleague, trudged forward, his doubts about the cryptid sightings they were investigating masked by the darkness. Their journey had taken them deep into the heart of the forest, far from civilization's comforting embrace. Emily had been captivated by stories of cryptids, creatures whispered about in the quiet corners of the world, beyond the reach of human understanding. She had spent months researching these legends, and she was convinced that the evidence was here, waiting to be discovered. Mark, on the other hand, had agreed to accompany her more out of camaraderie than conviction. He had always been the voice of reason, the one to ground Emily's flights of fancy. But as they ventured further into the eerie woods, his skepticism waned, replaced by an unsettling unease. Emily, undeterred by Mark's growing discomfort, led the way with a determined stride. Her heart raced with excitement, every rustle of leaves or snap of twigs sending a thrill down her spine. She felt as though they were on the cusp of a groundbreaking discovery, and nothing could deter her. But the forest had other plans. As the night wore on, the fog thickened, creating a dense, otherworldly atmosphere. The trees seemed to close in around them, their ancient branches reaching out like spectral hands. It was then that they noticed it, pairs of glowing eyes peering at them from the shadows. Mark gasped, his flashlight trembling as he aimed it toward the eerie spectacle. Emily's heart skipped a beat as she caught sight of those unearthly orbs, an unnatural phosphorescent blue that pierced the darkness. "What are those?" Mark whispered, his voice laced with fear. Emily strained to see, her pulse quickening. "I don't know, but we need to find out." With cautious steps, they approached the source of the glowing eyes. As they drew closer, they realized the eyes belonged to a creature, a cryptid that had, until now, eluded their understanding. It crouched low to the ground, its body shrouded in darkness, with only those haunting eyes revealing its presence. As they observed the creature, it seemed to observe them in return, unblinking and enigmatic. They felt a palpable sense of being watched, scrutinized by an entity beyond their comprehension. Mark's unease grew as he whispered to Emily, "We need to get out of here. This is not what we signed up for." But Emily, fueled by curiosity and the thrill of discovery, couldn't tear her eyes away from the cryptid. "Just a little longer, Mark. We have to document this." Their hesitance was rewarded with a startling revelation. From the shadows, a solitary hermit emerged, his tattered clothes and wild hair creating an image of a man who had long abandoned the trappings of civilization. He approached them with an eerie calmness, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of wisdom and madness. Caleb, the hermit, introduced himself with a voice that seemed to resonate with the ancient secrets of the forest. He explained that he had spent a lifetime living among the trees, observing the cryptids and understanding their ways. "You've ventured into their territory," Caleb warned, his voice a low, haunting murmur. "The forest holds its own secrets, and those who trespass may never return." Emily was undeterred. She bombarded Caleb with questions, her excitement unbridled. She was eager to learn more about the cryptid they had encountered, to unravel the mysteries of the ancient forest. But Caleb's gaze was inscrutable, and he spoke in riddles, as if testing their resolve. He warned them of the consequences of disturbing the cryptid's domain, of the price they might pay for their curiosity. As the night deepened, Emily and Mark bid farewell to Caleb and ventured further into the forest, their determination undiminished. But their encounter with the cryptid had left a mark on them, a lingering sense of unease that was impossible to shake. As they walked deeper into the woods, they realized they were being pursued. The glowing eyes returned, haunting their every step, their malevolent presence growing closer with each passing moment. It was as if the cryptid had taken a personal interest in them, as if it had marked them as intruders in its realm. Panic gripped Emily and Mark as they realized the cryptid was closing in on them. They ran, branches and underbrush clawing at their clothes, their flashlights casting erratic beams of light that revealed glimpses of the relentless pursuer. With a sinking feeling, they realized they were hopelessly lost. The forest seemed to twist and turn around them, leading them further into the heart of darkness. As the cryptid's eerie howls echoed through the forest, Emily and Mark's fear deepened. They knew they needed help, and they turned back, retracing their steps in search of Caleb. They found him at the edge of a mist-shrouded clearing, his eyes filled with a haunting wisdom. He revealed the cryptid's secret. It was a guardian of the ancient forest, a creature born from myth and madness. It protected the woods from intruders, those who sought to unravel its mysteries. With Caleb's guidance, Emily and Mark devised a plan to confront the cryptid. Armed with their flashlights and the knowledge Caleb had shared, they lured the creature into the clearing, its glowing eyes burning with malevolence. In a final, chilling encounter, they forced the cryptid to reveal itself, its grotesque form flickering in and out of existence. With their flashlights trained on it, they captured images that defied belief. The cryptid howled in agony as the light disrupted its ability to remain hidden. It thrashed and snarled, but Emily and Mark continued to shine their flashlights, refusing to be consumed by the darkness. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the cryptid vanished into the mist, leaving behind an eerie calm. Emily and Mark collapsed to the forest floor, their hearts still pounding with adrenaline. They had survived the night, but they knew that the cryptid's secrets would forever haunt their memories. As they made their way back to civilization, they couldn't help but ponder the consequences of trespassing on the cryptid's territory and the fear of the unknown. The forest had shown them that even in the darkest corners of the world, there were mysteries beyond comprehension, waiting to be discovered or feared. The haunting melody. The dark and ancient forest lay beneath a thick blanket of snow, its gnarled trees and frozen branches casting long, eerie shadows in the fading light. Lily, a talented musician in search of inspiration, ventured deeper into the heart of the forest, her violin case clutched tightly in her hand. Beside her, Daniel, her devoted husband, followed with unwavering support, though he couldn't shake the unease that gripped him. The snow crunching beneath their feet was the only sound that broke the eerie stillness. Lily had been drawn to this desolate forest, hoping to find the elusive spark that would ignite her creativity. The winter landscape, with its haunting beauty, seemed like the perfect backdrop for the haunting melody that she sought. As they ventured further, the air grew colder, and the world around them became hushed, as though the very forest was holding its breath. It was then that Lily stumbled upon an old, weathered music sheet half buried in the snow. The notes were intricate and unfamiliar, a melody that seemed to resonate with the very soul of the forest. "Look at this, Daniel," Lily exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement. "It's like the forest is gifting us its secrets." Daniel inspected the music sheet, his breath visible in the frigid air. "Are you sure it's a good idea to play this? It looks ancient." But Lily couldn't resist the pull of the melody. She raised her violin and began to play, her bow gliding across the strings with a haunting grace. The notes that emerged were like a siren's call, an enchanting melody that seemed to echo through the forest, captivating the very trees themselves. As the final note hung in the air, they heard it, a hauntingly beautiful tune, distant yet unmistakable. It was as though the forest had come to life, responding to Lily's music with its own mesmerizing song. They followed the enchanting melody through the snow-covered trees, their senses heightened by the haunting sounds that surrounded them. The world seemed to blur as they lost themselves in the music, their hearts filled with a sense of wonder and enchantment. But the forest held more secrets than they could have ever imagined. They stumbled upon the woodsman, a reclusive musician known to the forest's inhabitants. His eyes were filled with a tragic wisdom, and he spoke of the cryptid that thrived on music and emotion, a creature that had been awakened by Lily's melody. "The song stealer," the woodsman whispered, his voice heavy with sorrow. "It's drawn to music like a moth to a flame. It feeds on the emotions it evokes, and it will stop at nothing to possess the one who plays its tune." Lily and Daniel exchanged worried glances as they listened to the woodsman's tale. He had once been a brilliant musician himself, but the song stealer had taken everything from him, his music, his emotions, and the very essence of his soul. Desperation gnawed at them as they realized the danger they were in. The song stealer's haunting melody grew closer, its enchanting grasp reaching out to ensnare them. With the woodsman's guidance, they sought refuge in a hidden grove, shielded from the cryptid's relentless pursuit. But the song stealer's melody continued to echo in the distance, a haunting reminder of the danger that lurked beyond. As they waited, the woodsman shared his tragic history, revealing the sacrifices he had made for his art and the toll it had taken on his soul. He had spent years studying the cryptid's behavior, learning its secrets, and searching for a way to free himself from its grasp. But the song stealer was a formidable adversary, an entity born from music and emotion, and it would not be easily defeated. As night fell, the enchanting melody drew closer, its haunting beauty becoming impossible to resist. Lily's fingers itched to play her violin once more, to succumb to the allure of the cryptid's song. But Daniel and the woodsman knew the danger they faced. They pleaded with Lily to resist, to break free from the enchantment that threatened to consume her. In a climactic battle of emotions, Lily fought against the irresistible pull of the song stealer's melody. Tears streamed down her face as she grappled with the haunting music that threatened to ensnare her soul. With the strength of her love for Daniel and the guidance of the woodsman, Lily managed to resist the cryptid's enchantment. The haunting melody faded into the distance, leaving them breathless but victorious. As dawn broke over the snow-covered forest, they knew they had narrowly escaped the clutches of the song stealer. With the woodsman's help, they buried the ancient music sheet, hoping to seal away the cryptid's power forever. As they made their way back to civilization, Lily couldn't help but ponder the power of music to enchant and ensnare. She had witnessed firsthand the dangers that lay within the haunting melodies of the world, and she vowed to use her music to inspire rather than to possess. The forest had shown them that even in the darkest corners of the world, there were mysteries beyond comprehension waiting to be discovered or feared. And they had emerged from the enchanted woods with a newfound appreciation for the fragile balance between art and obsession. The Lost Expedition. The fog clung to the cursed forest like a shroud, obscuring the path ahead and muffling all sound. Dr. Harper, a fearless cryptid enthusiast, led a team of explorers into the heart of this enigmatic place. Among them was Marcus, a skeptical historian who had reluctantly agreed to join the expedition, and Alara, a mysterious forest guide with an uncanny connection to the unknown. The forest exuded an eerie silence that was both unsettling and profound. Dr. Harper had long heard tales of a legendary cryptid rumored to reside deep within these woods, a creature said to possess the power to transcend time and space. It was an expedition fraught with danger, but the allure of uncovering such a mystery was too powerful to resist. As they ventured further into the cursed forest, they stumbled upon ancient artifacts, relics of a forgotten time. The trees themselves seemed to twist and warp, their branches contorted into unnatural shapes, as if the very fabric of reality was being bent to the will of the forest. Marcus, the historian, examined the artifacts with growing fascination. They were unlike anything he had ever encountered in his studies, relics from civilizations long lost to time. It was as though the forest itself held the secrets of countless ages, waiting to be discovered by those who dared to enter. But the forest held more than just artifacts. It held the whispers of forgotten souls and the echoes of long-lost civilization. It whispered secrets and temptations, luring the explorers further into its depths. As the days turned to weeks, the expedition's sense of time began to blur. They found themselves caught in a nightmarish loop, unable to escape the relentless grasp of the forest. Each day felt like an eternity, and each night brought terrifying visions that left them questioning their sanity. Alara, the forest guide, seemed to possess an unnatural knowledge of the forest's mysteries. She spoke of the cryptid, the creature they sought, and its power to manipulate time. She had a connection to the unknown that both fascinated and frightened the team. As the expedition descended further into madness, the forest seemed to respond in kind. Time itself began to warp and bend. As days turned into hours and hours into seconds, reality fractured, and the explorers found themselves confronting their own pasts, their regrets, their fears, and their deepest desires. Dr. Harper, driven by an unyielding obsession, continued to press forward, determined to find the cryptid at any cost. Marcus, the historian, struggled to reconcile his skepticism with the surreal horrors unfolding before him. Alara, the forest guide, remained an enigmatic presence, her connection to the cryptid growing stronger with each passing day. But the forest had more in store for them than they could have ever imagined. One fateful night, as the team huddled around a campfire, the cryptid revealed itself. It emerged from the shadows, a grotesque fusion of human and beast, its eyes burning with an otherworldly intelligence. The creature's voice echoed through their minds, a dissonant melody that sent shivers down their spine. It spoke of the consequences of tampering with the fabric of reality, of the fleeting nature of time, and of the price they would pay for their curiosity. As the cryptid's power grew, the expedition's sense of self began to unravel. Memories and nightmares merged into a surreal tapestry, blurring the line between past and present. Each member of the team confronted their own demons, their darkest fears manifesting before them. Dr. Harper, consumed by his obsession, faced a nightmarish version of the cryptid, a grotesque reflection of his own desires. Marcus, the historian, was confronted by the ghosts of his past, reliving his regrets and mistakes with agonizing clarity. Laura, the forest guide, grappled with her connection to the cryptid, a bond that threatened to consume her. As the cryptid's influence grew stronger, the team's grasp on reality slipped further away. Time itself seemed to fracture, and the forest became an ever-shifting labyrinth of nightmares and illusions. In a mind-bending confrontation with the cryptid, the explorers fought to break free from its enchanting grasp. Reality warped and twisted around them as they grappled with the creature's power. With a final, desperate act, Allure tapped into her mysterious connection to the cryptid, harnessing its power to unravel the forest's illusion. The cryptid's own desires were turned against it, and it vanished into the fractured reality from which it had emerged. The team emerged from the cursed forest, their minds scarred by the horrors they had witnessed. They had escaped the clutches of the cryptid, but the experience had left them forever changed. As they made their way back to civilization, they couldn't help but ponder the consequences of tampering with the fabric of reality and the fleeting nature of time. The forest had shown them that even in the darkest corners of the world, there were mysteries beyond comprehension, waiting to be discovered or feared. The silent stalker. The dark forest lay before them, shrouded in an oppressive silence that seemed to defy the very laws of nature. Tom, a seasoned hunter with years of experience in the wilderness, led the way. Beside him, his daughter Rachel, a skeptic by nature, had reluctantly agreed to accompany him on this expedition. And then there was Silas, a mysterious recluse known to possess knowledge of the forest's secrets. As they ventured deeper into the Eerie woods, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The silence that enveloped them was unlike anything he had ever encountered. There were no bird calls, no rustling leaves, no sounds of life, just an unnatural stillness that seemed to stretch on forever. Rachel, her skepticism giving way to unease, whispered to her father, "Dad, have you ever seen anything like this before?" Tom shook his head, his keen senses on high alert. "No, Rachel, this isn't right. We need to be cautious." Their footsteps on the forest floor were the only sounds that broke the eerie quiet. Tom had come to the forest to hunt, to track elusive prey, but now he couldn't shake the feeling that they were the ones being hunted. As they pressed forward, the silence deepened, the forest's oppressive stillness bearing down on them like a heavy weight. Tom's instincts told him that something was lurking in the shadows, something that thrived in this unnatural quiet. And then they saw it, a cryptid, a creature born of the forest's silence. It moved with a stealth that was impossible to comprehend, its form flickering in and out of sight as it stalked them from the shadows. Tom raised his rifle, but before he could take a shot, Silas intervened. "Wait," he whispered urgently, his eyes locked on the cryptid. "This is the silent stalker, and it hunts in silence. Any noise we make will only draw it closer." Rachel's eyes widened with fear as she watched the cryptid's unnatural movements. "What do we do, Dad?" Silas's knowledge of the forest's secrets proved invaluable. He explained that the silent stalker had been drawn to their presence, lured by the disruption of the natural order. It was a creature born of silence, a guardian of the forest's tranquility, and it would stop at nothing to restore the quiet. As they continued to evade the silent stalker, Silas shared his own dark past. He had once sought to tame the forest, to harness its secrets for his own gain. But the silent stalker had exacted a terrible price for his arrogance, taking away his voice as punishment for disrupting the forest's natural order. Now, Silas possessed a deep understanding of the forest's secrets, and he had dedicated his life to preserving its silence. With the cryptid's relentless pursuit, the team's sense of fear and vulnerability deepened. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, threatened to draw the silent stalker closer. They had to rely on Silas's guidance and their own intuition to outwit the creature. As night fell and the forest grew even darker, they realized that they were running out of time. The silent stalker was closing in, its presence a haunting reminder of their intrusion into the forest's sacred silence. In a high-stakes showdown, the team confronted the silent stalker, using their wits and Silas's knowledge to outmaneuver the creature. They moved with deliberate care, every step calculated to avoid making a sound. The cryptid's eyes burned with an otherworldly intelligence as it circled them, its movements fluid and graceful. It was a creature born of the silence, a guardian of the forest's tranquility, and it would stop at nothing to restore the quiet. With a final, daring maneuver, they managed to draw the silent stalker away from their campsite. Silas's voiceless cry echoed through the forest as he sacrificed himself to lead the cryptid away from Tom and Rachel. As they watched in horror, the forest swallowed Silas and the silent stalker, their forms vanishing into the darkness. The silence that had weighed so heavily on them began to dissipate, replaced by the sounds of life returning to the woods. Tom and Rachel emerged from the forest, their hearts heavy with grief for their lost companion. They had escaped the silent stalker, but the experience had left them forever changed. As they made their way back to civilization, they couldn't help but ponder the power of silence and the consequences of disrupting the natural order. The forest had shown them that even in the darkest corners of the world, there were mysteries beyond comprehension, waiting to be discovered or feared. The phantom fog. The forest lay shrouded in an impenetrable mist, a ghostly veil that seemed to blur the boundaries between reality and illusion. Alex, an amateur paranormal investigator, and Kate, a skeptical journalist with a fascination for the unknown, had ventured deep into this fog-covered wilderness. They had come in search of answers to a series of strange disappearances tied to a cryptid that could manipulate the very fog that surrounded them. As they made their way through the dense fog, their flashlights casting weak beams that barely pierced the mist, Alex's sense of unease grew with each step. The forest seemed to breathe around them, its ghostly apparitions shifting and swirling like wraiths in the night. Kate, her skepticism slowly giving way to unease, whispered to Alex, "This place, it doesn't feel right." Alex nodded, his voice hushed. "I know, Kate, but we have to find out what's causing these disappearances." The fog thickened around them, creating an eerie, disorienting atmosphere. The forest sounds were muffled, as if the very air had been sucked out of the world. They were enveloped in an unnatural silence that seemed to stretch on forever. As they continued deeper into the forest, the apparitions grew more pronounced. Shadows danced in the mist, taking on shapes that defied explanation. Alex had read about the cryptid they were searching for, a creature that could manipulate the fog to create illusions, to draw its prey deeper into its grasp. It was then that they encountered the Fog Walker, a mysterious figure who appeared out of the mist like a specter. His eyes held a haunted wisdom, and his voice was filled with a cryptic warning. "You should not have come here," the Fog Walker whispered, his voice barely audible over the eerie silence. "The fog conceals more than you can imagine." Alex and Kate exchanged worried glances. They had heard rumors of the Fog Walker, a guardian of the forest who knew its secrets, but they had never expected to encounter him. He spoke of the cryptid that manipulated the fog, a creature that thrived on deception and illusion. But they were determined to uncover the truth, to shed light on the mysteries that surrounded them. With the Fog Walker's guidance, they continued to navigate the haunted forest, their senses on high alert. The cryptid's illusions grew more elaborate, as if it sought to ensnare them in a web of unreality. They saw visions of loved ones calling out to them from the mist, beckoning them to join them in the fog. But Alex and Kate knew that these apparitions were tricks of the cryptid, designed to lure them deeper into the forest's heart. As they pressed on, the cryptid's power over the fog became more pronounced. They saw phantoms of long-forgotten landscapes, entire worlds that seemed to exist only in the mists of the forest. Reality and illusion blurred, and they struggled to discern what was real from what was a product of the cryptid's manipulation. The Fog Walker continued to guide them, offering cryptic advice and warnings. He spoke of the thin line between reality and illusion, of the consequences of meddling with the supernatural. He urged them to turn back, to abandon their quest for answers. But Alex and Kate were determined to confront the cryptid, to uncover the truth behind the disappearances that had brought them here. In a climactic battle with the cryptid, they faced the full extent of its power. It manipulated the fog to create a nightmarish labyrinth of illusions, forcing them to confront their deepest fears and regrets. But with the Fog Walker's guidance and their unwavering determination, they managed to break free from the cryptid's illusions. They confronted the creature in a final, high-stakes showdown, their flashlights cutting through the fog to reveal its grotesque form. The cryptid fought back with all its power, manipulating the fog to create a tempest of illusions. But Alex and Kate held their ground, their determination unwavering. With a final, desperate effort, they exposed the cryptid's true nature, breaking its hold on the fog. As the mist began to dissipate, the cryptid let out a haunting wail, its power undone. It vanished into the fog, leaving behind a sense of eerie calm. Alex and Kate emerged from the haunted forest, their hearts heavy with the weight of the mysteries they had encountered. The fog walker had disappeared into the mist, his cryptic warnings echoing in their minds. As they made their way back to civilization, they couldn't help but ponder the thin line between reality and illusion, and the consequences of meddling with the supernatural. The forest had shown them that even in the darkest corners of the world, there were mysteries beyond comprehension, waiting to be discovered or feared. The Curse of the Blood Moon. The forest lay cloaked in darkness, the towering trees looming like ancient sentinels beneath a rare blood moon. Alex, a historian with an insatiable obsession for legends, had dragged Emily, his skeptical partner, into this eerie wilderness. They had journeyed here to uncover the truth behind a curse tied to a cryptid that thrived under the ominous glow of the lunar phenomenon. As they ventured deeper into the shadowy woods, the forest seemed to close in around them as if it were breathing. Alex was undeterred by the ominous atmosphere. He believed that the answers to the curse lay hidden within these haunted woods. Emily, on the other hand, had reservations. "Alex, this place gives me the creeps. Are you sure we should be here?" He nodded, his determination unwavering. "We're close, Emily, I can feel it." The blood moon cast an eerie, crimson hue over the landscape, its ominous glow intensifying with each step they took. Alex had spent years researching the cryptid said to be tied to this lunar curse, a creature that hunted under the blood moon's malevolent light, exacting vengeance upon those who dared to trespass in its domain. And then they found her, Cassandra, a reclusive occultist who had lived in the forest for decades. She possessed the knowledge they sought, but her eyes held the weight of ancient secrets. "You seek to break the curse," Cassandra whispered, her voice like a soft, haunting breeze. "But the price is steep, and the consequences dire." Alex and Emily listened with bated breath as Cassandra explained the cryptid's connection to the lunar cycle. She spoke of its insatiable hunger for revenge, its power to manipulate the blood moon's energy, and the dark rituals needed to break the curse. But Cassandra warned them that breaking the curse came at a grave cost. It required a blood offering, a life sacrifice to the cryptid to appease its vengeful spirit. The thought of such a sacrifice chilled Alex to the bone, but he was willing to pay any price to uncover the truth. The blood moon's ominous glow intensified, casting long, shadowy fingers through the forest. They knew that time was running out. The cryptid's attacks were tied to the lunar cycle, and they were now at the peak of its power. As the blood moon reached its zenith, the cryptid's presence became palpable. It stalked them through the darkness, its malevolent eyes glowing like crimson embers in the night. The forest itself seemed to come alive, its trees shifting and contorting as if they were guardians of a terrible secret. Cassandra guided them through a series of dark rituals, each one designed to weaken the cryptid's hold on the curse. But with each step, the price of their actions became more evident. The cryptid's attacks grew more relentless, its hunger for revenge insatiable. It toyed with them in the shadows, appearing as fleeting glimpses of terror before disappearing into the night. Emily's skepticism had long since turned into fear as the reality of their situation set in. And then came the final ritual, the blood offering. Alex was prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice to break the curse, but Cassandra had warned him that the cryptid's appetite for vengeance knew no bounds. As he prepared to offer his own blood, the cryptid descended upon them, its presence a tangible force of malevolence. It circled them like a predator, its eyes filled with an ancient hatred. Emily's voice trembled as she whispered to Alex, "Are you sure about this?" He nodded, his voice resolute. "We have to break the curse, Emily, no matter the cost." With a deep breath, Alex made the offering, his blood seeping into the earth. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the world around them growing eerily still. And then it happened, the curse was broken. The blood moon's ominous glow began to recede, its crimson light fading into the night. The cryptid let out a haunting wail, its power undone. But as the curse was lifted, the forest exacted its price. It came alive with a vengeance, its ancient trees contorting and shifting, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers. Cassandra, in a final act of sacrifice, offered herself to the forest, becoming one with the ancient trees. She whispered her final words to Alex and Emily, her voice a haunting refrain in the night. With the curse broken, they emerged from the haunted forest, their hearts heavy with the weight of the price they had paid. The blood moon had revealed its secrets, but it had also exacted its toll. As they made their way back to civilization, They couldn't help but ponder the allure of forbidden knowledge and the price of breaking ancient curses. The forest had shown them that even in the darkest corners of the world, there were mysteries beyond comprehension waiting to be discovered or feared. The guardian of the woods. The tranquil forest stretched out before them, a sanctuary of towering trees and lush undergrowth that seemed untouched by time. Sarah, a dedicated botanist, had brought her nature-loving son, Ethan, to this magical place to share the wonders of the natural world. Little did they know that the forest was guarded by a benevolent cryptid guardian known as Eliana. As they ventured deeper into the woods, Sarah's heart swelled with appreciation for the vibrant tapestry of life that surrounded them. Ethan's eyes shone with wonder as he examined the intricacies of the forest's flora and fauna. It was a place that felt like a hidden paradise, a world teeming with beauty and magic. And then, amidst the ancient trees and dappled sunlight, they discovered Eliana. The guardian spirit appeared before them as a gentle, ethereal presence, her form a shimmering mirage of nature's splendor. Eliana's eyes radiated kindness, and her voice was like the soft rustling of leaves in the wind. "You have come to the heart of the forest," Eliana spoke, her voice carrying the wisdom of centuries. "I am its guardian, and I watch over all that dwell here." Sarah and Ethan listened in awe as Eliana explained her role as protector of the woods. She spoke of the delicate balance of nature, the interconnectedness of all living things, and the importance of preserving the forest's beauty and magic. Ethan's eyes widened with excitement. "Can we help you protect the forest, Eliana?" Eliana smiled, her presence radiating warmth. "Yes, young one, your love for the natural world is a gift. Together, we shall ensure that the forest remains a haven for all creatures." As the days passed, Sarah, Ethan, and Eliana formed a bond as strong as the ancient trees that surrounded them. They learned from Eliana the secrets of the forest, the songs of the birds, the whispers of the wind, and the hidden language of the plants. It was a world of enchantment and wonder, and Ethan's passion for nature deepened with each passing day. But the forest's serenity was not to last. Dark forces threatened the woods. Driven by greed and disregard for the delicate balance of nature, loggers encroached upon the forest, their chainsaws echoing like thunder through the once tranquil woods. Eliana, the guardian spirit, sensed the danger. She urged Sarah and Ethan to take action, to protect the forest they had come to love. Together, they set out to thwart the destructive forces and preserve the magic of the woods. Their journey was fraught with danger as they confronted the loggers, pleading with them to spare the forest. But their pleas fell on deaf ears, and the loggers continued their relentless assault on the ancient trees. In the heart of the forest, a heartwarming climax of protection and preservation unfolded. Eliana, the guardian spirit, called upon the magic of the woods to protect their beloved home. The very trees and creatures of the forest rose up in defense, their presence an awe-inspiring force of nature. With the power of the forest behind them, Sarah, Ethan, and Eliana confronted the loggers in a heart-pounding showdown. The loggers were no match for the guardian spirit's magic and the unwavering determination of Sarah and Ethan. As the loggers retreated, defeated and humbled, Eliana's presence filled the forest with a sense of triumph and renewal. The ancient trees stood tall and proud, their branches reaching out in gratitude. Ethan turned to Eliana, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Eliana, for showing us the true magic of the forest." Eliana smiled, her form shimmering with the beauty of the woods. "Remember, young one, that the bonds between humans and the natural world are sacred. With love and respect, we can ensure that the forest's beauty and magic endure for generations to come." Sarah and Ethan left the forest with their hearts full of hope and a deep commitment to preserving nature. They knew that the guardian spirit, Eliana, would watch over the woods, and they vowed to be stewards of the natural world, protecting its beauty and magic for all to enjoy. As they made their way back to civilization, they couldn't help but ponder the importance of preserving nature and the profound bonds between humans and the natural world. The forest had shown them that even in the darkest corners of the world, there was magic to be found and protected, a reminder of the interconnectedness of all life on Earth. The haunting howl. The forest was not a place for the faint of heart, especially not at night. The moon hung in the sky like a pale lantern, casting eerie shadows that danced among the towering trees. Sarah, a fearless outdoorswoman with a troubled past, found herself deep within this remote and unsettling forest. She had come here to confront her fears, but what awaited her in the darkness was beyond anything she could have imagined. Sarah was no stranger to the wilderness. Her life had been a constant struggle, filled with trials and tribulations. Camping alone in this forsaken forest was her way of proving to herself that she could conquer anything, even the darkest corners of her mind. Armed with a lantern, she ventured further into the heart of the forest, determined to find the strength she had lost. As Sarah moved through the underbrush, she stumbled upon an old, weathered diary. Its pages were brittle, and the ink had faded with time. Curiosity getting the better of her, she opened it to a random page and began to read. May 17, 1893. The diary's entry began. The haunting howl in these woods continues to torment my dreams. It is the sound of anguish, a cry for release from an eternity of suffering. I fear the spirit that dwells here. Sarah's heart raced as she read the cryptic words. It seemed that she was not the first to be haunted by the forest's eerie howl. She decided to push deeper into the woods, determined to uncover the source of the unsettling sound. The further she walked, the more the howling intensified. It was a chilling, mournful wail that seemed to seep into her very bones. Sarah could feel it in the pit of her stomach, a sense of dread that clung to her like a second skin. Then, as if conjured by the haunting melody, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was ghostly, ethereal, and seemed to be made of moonlight itself. The figure moved with an otherworldly grace, its eyes fixated on Sarah. She froze, unable to tear her gaze away. "Who are you?" Sarah finally managed to stammer, her voice trembling. The ghostly figure did not reply. Instead, it continued to approach, its presence sending shivers down her spine. Sarah's lantern flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced around the spectral form. As the figure drew nearer, Sarah could see a deep sadness in its eyes. It was a sadness that mirrored her own, a reflection of the pain and suffering that had haunted her for so long. "What do you want?" she demanded, her fear giving way to a fierce determination. The ghostly figure raised its hand and pointed into the distance, where the haunting howl seemed to echo from the very heart of the forest. Sarah understood. The figure wanted her to follow, to uncover the truth behind the haunting howl that echoed through the woods. With a resolute nod, she took a step forward, her lantern casting a dim, wavering light as she followed the ghostly presence deeper into the forest. The journey was treacherous, filled with thick underbrush and gnarled roots that threatened to trip her at every turn. The howling grew louder, filling the air with an unbearable sense of sorrow. It was as if the forest itself wept for the past. Finally, they reached a clearing, and in the center of it stood an ancient, gnarled tree. Its branches stretched out like skeletal arms, and in its hollow trunk, Sarah saw a faint, bluish light. It pulsed with an otherworldly energy, and the haunting howl seemed to emanate from it. The ghostly figure extended its hand toward the tree, its form flickering like a dying flame. Sarah could feel the presence's desperation, its need for release from the torment that bound it to this place. Without hesitation, she approached the tree and placed her hand on its bark. The moment her skin made contact, a rush of memories flooded her mind. She saw the figure in life, a tormented soul trapped in a tragic love story that had ended in betrayal and heartbreak. Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she realized the truth. The haunting howl was the cry of a soul in pain, a spirit bound to the tree by a love that had gone horribly wrong. It was a cry for release, for forgiveness. With a trembling voice, Sarah spoke the words that the spirit had been longing to hear for over a century. "I forgive you," she whispered. The tree shuddered, and the bluish light pulsed brightly. The ghostly figure let out a final, mournful wail before dissipating into the night, finally finding the peace it had sought for so long. As the haunting howl faded away, the forest grew silent. The moon cast a soft, comforting light over the clearing, and Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The forest, once a place of fear, had become a place of healing. Sarah knew that her journey was far from over, but now she had the strength to face her own demons. The haunting howl had shown her that even in the darkest of places, there could be redemption and forgiveness. She left the forest that night with a renewed sense of purpose and a heart no longer burdened by the past. The campfire shadows the ancient forest stood as a sentinel of time, its dense, towering trees whispering secrets of centuries gone by. At the heart of this primordial wilderness lay an isolated campsite, a place where the boundaries between the known and the unknown blurred. Alex, an experienced camper with a love for adventure, had chosen this remote location for his latest excursion. He yearned to test his survival skills, to prove to himself that he could conquer the wild. With a backpack filled with essentials, he ventured deep into the forest, far from the conveniences of civilization. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Alex reached the heart of the forest, where his campsite awaited. Setting up his tent and gathering firewood, He was filled with a sense of exhilaration. The isolation brought a thrill unlike any other, a feeling of being one with nature and its raw, unyielding power. With the campfire crackling to life, Alex sat on a log, the flames casting an intimate glow that pushed back the encroaching darkness. He felt a twinge of unease, knowing that he was truly alone, miles from the nearest human contact. But this was precisely what he had sought. As the night deepened, a peculiar sensation washed over him. It was as if the forest itself held its breath, waiting, watching. Alex tried to dismiss it as his imagination, attributing the sensation to the isolation he had embraced. However, as the hours passed, the forest's whispers grew louder. Faint, whispering voices seemed to emanate from the depths of the woods, as if carried on the wind. They were unintelligible, eerie, and seemed to hold secrets long forgotten by man. Alex strained to hear more clearly, his heart quickening with a sense of foreboding. The shadows among the trees began to shift, their movements too deliberate to be mere tricks of the firelight. They gathered on the fringes of his vision, indistinct and formless, yet undeniably present. The campfire's flames flickered and danced, casting grotesque silhouettes upon the trees. Alex's paranoia grew, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows had a malevolent intent. "What do you want?" he called out into the dark, his voice quivering. The whispering voices grew more insistent, their tones taking on an unsettling, chant-like quality. Alex's hands trembled as he clutched a stick, ready to defend himself if necessary. The shadows seemed to respond to his fear, closing in on the campsite. They twisted and swirled, their movement almost hypnotic. He could no longer deny that they were not mere figments of his imagination. They were something else, something otherworldly. With the firelight waning, Alex made a fateful decision. He would confront these shadowy intruders. Gathering his courage, he stepped away from the campfire and moved toward the darkness, where the shadows congregated. The forest seemed to come alive with an ominous energy. As Alex advanced, the shadows retreated, but he could hear their whispering voices growing louder, more urgent. It was as if they were trying to lead him deeper into the forest, into their domain. For what felt like an eternity, Alex pursued the enigmatic shadows, feeling as if he had crossed into another dimension. Time and space warped, and he became disoriented, lost in a world of darkness and whispering voices. Finally, he stumbled upon a clearing deep within the forest, and in its center stood an ancient, gnarled tree. Its bark was etched with symbols that seemed to writhe and shift in the moonlight. The shadows converged on the tree, and Alex realized that he had been led here for a reason. His heart pounded as he examined the tree's symbols, a sense of dread washing over him. These markings were no ordinary graffiti. They were a dark, forgotten language, a key to some malevolent power. As he touched the tree's gnarled surface, memories flooded his mind. He saw the forest as it had been centuries ago, a place of ancient rites and offerings to appease a dark entity that dwelled within the tree. The shadows were its servants, and the forest had been tainted by their presence. Alex knew that he had stumbled upon a dark secret, a presence that had waited centuries to be set free. The forest had lured him here, playing on his desire for adventure and isolation. In that moment, the tree's symbols pulsed with an unholy light, and the shadows surged forward, engulfing Alex. Their whispering voices became a cacophony of eerie chants, drowning out his screams. As the shadows consumed him, the forest grew silent once more, as if the ancient trees and the dark entity within the gnarled tree had finally found release. The campfire's embers smoldered, the flames extinguished, leaving nothing behind but a shroud of darkness. The ancient forest had reclaimed its secrets, and Alex had become one with the campfire's shadows, forever lost to the wilderness. The isolation and the vulnerability of man in the wilderness had played their part in a sinister game, and the fear of the unknown had claimed another victim. In the heart of the ancient forest, the whispering voices continued their eerie chants, a chilling reminder of the darkness that dwelled within, waiting for the next unsuspecting traveler to venture into its realm. The midnight visitor. The full moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie, silvery glow upon the desolate campground. Emily, a young woman haunted by troubles that seemed to follow her like shadows, had sought solace in the remote wilderness. She hoped that the isolation would provide the escape she so desperately craved. The campground was nestled in a valley, surrounded by dense woods that seemed to breathe with a sinister life of their own. It was the perfect place to disconnect from the world, or so Emily had thought. As night fell and the moon ascended, she found herself alone in the quiet of the wilderness. She had arrived at the campground earlier in the day, setting up her small, weathered tent. The only source of light was the pale moon, and the only sounds were the whispers of the wind and the occasional rustling of leaves. It was a serene and isolated setting, precisely what Emily had desired. As she lay in her tent, listening to the symphony of the night, she tried to put her troubles behind her. The past had been a relentless tormentor, and she had come here seeking respite from the memories that clung to her like a shroud. However, as the clock struck midnight, the tranquil atmosphere of the campground shifted. Emily felt an inexplicable unease, a feeling that she was no longer alone. It was as if the very air had thickened with a malevolent presence. A sudden chill swept through the tent, causing Emily to shiver. She pulled the sleeping bag tight around her, trying to convince herself that it was merely a product of her overactive imagination. Yet, the sensation of being watched persisted. Just as the unease began to fade, a whisper pierced the silence. It was faint, almost inaudible, but the words were clear. "Emily, you cannot escape," the voice murmured, sending a shiver down her spine. She held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. There was no denying it. Someone, or something, was in her tent with her. Panic threatened to overwhelm her, but she had to see who or what had invaded her solitude. Summoning her courage, she unzipped the sleeping bag and slowly emerged from the tent. The campground was bathed in the silver light of the full moon, revealing the eerie stillness that enveloped her. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but Emily knew what she had heard. She couldn't ignore the presence any longer. She began to search the perimeter of the campground, her flashlight cutting through the darkness like a beacon. But no one was there. The woods were silent, their depths hidden in the obsidian shadows. It was as if the voice had never been there, and Emily began to question her own sanity. Resigned, she returned to her tent, determined to put the bizarre encounter behind her. She hoped that sleep would provide the escape she sought. But as the hours ticked away, her exhaustion gave way to a different kind of dread. Just as the clock struck midnight once more, the voice returned, colder and more insistent. "Emily, you cannot escape," it repeated, the words echoing through the tent like a chilling refrain. Emily felt a presence in the room, an unseen entity that lingered just out of reach. The air grew heavy, and the temperature plummeted, the cold seeping into her bones. She knew that the midnight visitor was real, and it was not bound by the laws of the living. Each night, the visitor returned, and with each visitation, Emily's fear intensified. The voice grew more sinister, its words carrying the weight of something ancient and malevolent. It knew her past, and it wanted her to remember. As the nights passed, Emily's body bore the marks of the visitor's torment. Bruises and scratches marred her skin, and she could no longer deny the reality of the situation. She was being visited by a vengeful spirit, one that seemed intent on forcing her to confront the darkness that had haunted her for so long. Desperate for answers, Emily began to research the history of the campground. It didn't take long to uncover the grim truth. The very land she had sought for refuge had a dark history, a history of tragedy and suffering. The campground had once been a place of rituals, of offerings to appease a malevolent entity that dwelled in the surrounding woods. It was a place where the veil between the living and the dead was thin, and where the past had a way of bleeding into the present. Emily realized that she had unwittingly stepped into a world where the sins of the past had not been forgotten. The vengeful spirit that haunted her was a victim of those ancient rituals, a tormented soul bound to the land. Determined to break free from the midnight visitor's torment, Emily began to perform her own rituals, ones intended to appease the spirit and put it to rest. Each night, she whispered words of forgiveness and understanding, hoping that the spirit would find peace. Finally, on a moonlit night, the visitor's voice grew softer, the chill in the air dissipated, and the presence that had haunted her for so long faded away. The campground was silent once more, and Emily was left to contemplate the darkness of her past. The campground remained a desolate and eerie place, a reminder of the sins of the past and the consequences of seeking refuge in the wrong places. Emily had escaped the midnight visitor, but the scars, both physical and emotional, would stay with her for a lifetime. In the end, she had come to understand that true escape could only be found within herself, and that the haunting of her own past was a darkness that could not be outrun, no matter how deep into the wilderness she ventured. The Whispering Pines. Mark, an adventurous hiker with a yearning for the unknown, had embarked on a solo camping trip into the heart of a pitch-black forest. The moon, shrouded by thick clouds, provided no guidance as he ventured further into the wilderness. Tall, foreboding pine trees loomed overhead, casting a web of darkness that seemed to swallow the very air. He had chosen this remote location to escape the chaos of the world, to find solace among the ancient giants that stood sentinel over the forest. Mark relished the silence, the solitude, but he was about to discover that the silence held secrets that were far from comforting. As he set up his campsite, the air was heavy with an eerie stillness that seemed to seep into his very bones. The forest was silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves, a sound that seemed to whisper ancient secrets to him. Mark, a man of determination, was undeterred by the oppressive atmosphere. He had always been drawn to the unknown, to places where few dared to tread. As night fell, he sat by the campfire, listening to the crackling flames and the soft murmur of the forest. But then, faint whispers began to emerge from the darkness. They were barely audible, like a soft breeze brushing against his ears, but the words were chilling. Come closer, they beckoned, and Mark could not resist the urge to follow their eerie call. With a flashlight in hand, he ventured into the inky blackness, guided by the whispered voices. The forest seemed to come alive, its towering trees closing in on him as if they were alive, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The further he walked, the more the voices intensified, their words growing more insistent and sinister. They promised secrets, knowledge beyond his wildest dreams, and Mark felt compelled to uncover their mysteries. Finally, he reached a clearing deep within the forest, and in the center stood an ancient, gnarled pine tree. Its branches seemed to twist and writhe, and in its shadowy hollow, Mark saw a pale, bluish light. It pulsed with an otherworldly energy, and the voices seemed to emanate from it. The whispers urged Mark to touch the tree, to delve into the secrets it held. Unable to resist the lure of the unknown, he reached out and placed his hand on the gnarled bark. As soon as his skin made contact, a rush of memories flooded his mind. He saw the forest as it had been centuries ago, a place of ancient rituals and offerings to appease a dark entity that dwelled within the pine trees. The whispers were the voices of those who had fallen prey to the lure of the forest's way of seducing them into its darkness. With mounting horror, Mark realized that he had become ensnared in the same trap. The forest, with its whispered promises, had drawn him in, and he had become one with the eerie voices that had haunted him. As he pulled his hand away from the tree, the bluish light pulsated brighter, and the whispers grew louder and more frenzied. Mark's mind reeled, and he could feel the presence of the forest, a malevolent force that sought to claim his soul. He tried to flee, but the forest's grasp was unyielding. The trees seemed to close in on him, their branches entwining like serpents, their whispers growing into an overwhelming cacophony. Mark's sanity began to crumble, and he felt as though he was losing himself in the darkness. With a final, desperate cry, he begged the forest for release, for forgiveness. He had been ensnared by its seductive whispers, and now he was trapped in a world of eternal darkness. The bluish light dimmed, and the forest released its hold on Mark. He stumbled back from the gnarled tree, his mind filled with the memories of those who had come before him, the souls that had been claimed by the forest's darkness. As he made his way back to his campsite, the forest was silent once more, the whispering voices faded into the night. Mark had escaped the lure of the unknown, but the darkness had left its mark on him, a reminder of the fragility of the human spirit in the face of the unknown. The forest, with its towering pine trees and whispered secrets, would forever remain a place of quiet dread and paranoia, a reminder that sometimes the darkness within us is the most terrifying unknown of all. Mark had succumbed to the lure of the forest, but he had also learned a chilling lesson about the depths of the human psyche and the consequences of seeking answers in the darkest corners of existence. The vengeful spirits. James, a skeptic of all things supernatural, had long dismissed the tales of vengeful spirits that were said to haunt the isolated campsite nestled beside the murky, haunted lake. He prided himself on his rationality and had come to the campsite to prove that the legends were mere folklore, the product of overactive imaginations. The campsite was a place of seclusion, hidden deep within the woods. Tall trees surrounded the lake, their branches casting long, ghostly shadows upon the water. It was the perfect place for James to set up his camp and test his theory. As night fell and the moonlight bathed the lake in an eerie glow, he believed that he was in for a quiet, uneventful night. With a campfire crackling, James sat by the lake shore, the ripples of the water lapping gently at the shore. He gazed out at the lake, determined to debunk the claims of malevolent spirits that were said to haunt it. He had his camera ready, determined to capture any unexplained phenomena. The night was still and silent, and James felt a sense of unease creeping over him. He tried to dismiss it as a product of his own skepticism, but as the hours passed, his unease grew. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that unseen eyes were fixed upon him. Just as he began to contemplate turning in for the night, a soft, mournful wail echoed across the lake. It was a sound that sent a shiver down his spine, a sound that seemed to carry a deep sense of longing and despair. He turned his camera toward the lake, determined to capture the source of the chilling sound. It was then that he saw them, ghostly figures, their forms ethereal and translucent, gliding silently across the water's surface. The apparitions were pale and haunting, their eyes fixed on James. His heart pounded as he watched the spectral figures draw nearer. He could see the sadness in their eyes, a sadness that seemed to mirror his own growing unease. He knew that he couldn't explain what he was witnessing with his rational mind, and for the first time, he questioned his skepticism. The ghostly figures approached the shore, their movements graceful and otherworldly. They seemed to reach out to him, their hands passing through the air as if in search of something. James was paralyzed with fear, unable to look away from their haunting presence. As the apparitions faded back into the lake, James was left in a state of shock. The rational explanations he had relied upon no longer seemed to hold weight in the face of such inexplicable phenomena. He was left with a growing sense of dread, a sense that the lake held secrets that defied all reason. For the following nights, the ghostly figures returned, their presence becoming a nightly ritual. Each time, they drew nearer, their spectral forms becoming more distinct. James began to capture their images on his camera, but the more he learned about them, the more he realized the depth of their torment. The apparitions were the spirits of those who had met tragic ends in the lake, their lives cut short by accidents and misfortunes. They were bound to the lake, unable to move on to the afterlife, their unfinished business keeping them tethered to the mortal realm. As James delved deeper into the history of the campsite, he discovered a chilling revelation. The lake had a dark past, a history of secrets and tragedies that had been buried beneath the surface. It was a place where the living had ignored the warnings of the past, a place where the spirits sought to exact their vengeance. James realized that he had become an unwitting intruder in the spirits' realm, and his skepticism had only fueled their determination to make their presence known. He began to feel their anguish, their sadness, and their anger. The spirits wanted him to acknowledge their existence, to bear witness to their pain. Determined to understand their plight, James conducted a series of rituals, hoping to appease the vengeful spirits and help them find peace. Each night, he whispered words of acknowledgement and forgiveness, offering them the release they so desperately sought. Finally, on a moonlit night, the spirits began to fade away, their apparitions growing fainter until they were nothing but distant memories. The lake, once haunted by their presence, grew silent, its surface undisturbed. James had witnessed the supernatural and come to understand that skepticism could not always explain the inexplicable. The campsite remained a place of eerie legends and a chilling reminder of the consequences of ignoring the warnings of the past. In the end, James had learned that the spirits of the lake were real, and that their presence served as a powerful reminder that the boundaries between the living and the dead were sometimes thinner than one could ever imagine. The lake held secrets that defied the rational mind, and the vengeful spirits had taught James a lesson he would never forget. The curse of the lone camper. Rachel, a determined and headstrong camper, had always been one to defy warnings and embrace the unknown. She was drawn to the idea of conquering the untouched wilderness, of challenging the very fabric of the supernatural. So, when she heard whispers of a cursed and shadowy campsite hidden in a forsaken valley, her curiosity was piqued, and she felt an irresistible pull to explore it. The valley had a reputation that sent shivers down the spines of the locals. It was said to be plagued by an ancient curse, a malevolent force that had claimed the lives of those who dared to enter. It was a place of darkness, where the boundaries between the living and the dead blurred, and it was a place that beckoned to Rachel like a siren's call. Undeterred by the warnings, Rachel set out on her solo camping trip, determined to prove that the legends of the curse were mere superstition. She believed in her own rationality, in her ability to confront the unknown and emerge unscathed. The Forsaken Valley was the perfect place to put her convictions to the test. As she arrived at the campsite, the atmosphere was oppressive, the air heavy with an ominous presence that seemed to permeate the very ground. The valley was shrouded in shadows, its ancient trees reaching out like skeletal fingers, their branches casting long, eerie silhouettes in the fading light. Rachel set up her camp, her determination unshaken by the oppressive atmosphere that surrounded her. As night fell, she stoked the campfire and settled in, determined to conquer her fear and prove that the curse was nothing more than a legend. However, as the moon ascended into the sky, the campsite seemed to come alive with a sinister energy. Rachel felt a presence, a malevolent force that seemed to have waited for her arrival. It was as if the valley itself had been stirred by her recklessness. Just as she began to doubt the wisdom of her decision, Rachel heard a soft, eerie whisper carried on the wind. It was a voice that seemed to emanate from the very shadows, a voice that sent chills down her spine. "You should not be here," it murmured, its words laced with a dark, ancient power. Rachel's heart raced as she looked around, trying to locate the source of the whisper. But there was no one in sight, and the valley remained silent and still. She felt as though she had stumbled into a realm where the supernatural was very real, a realm where the curse held sway. As the night deepened, Rachel's unease grew. She could hear faint, ghostly laughter in the distance, as if the valley was mocking her recklessness. She saw shadowy figures moving at the fringes of her vision, their forms indistinct and foreboding. The apparitions drew closer, their movements graceful and eerie. They were spectral and translucent, their eyes fixed on Rachel with a hunger that sent a shiver down her spine. She had never believed in ghosts, but now they seemed to surround her, their presence undeniable. Each night, the apparitions drew nearer, their voices filled with a haunting lament. They whispered of the curse, of the darkness that had claimed their souls, and they urged Rachel to leave the valley before it was too late. But she was determined to confront the supernatural and prove that the curse held no power over her. As she explored the campsite during the day, Rachel discovered an old journal hidden beneath a pile of rotting leaves. It was a journal that detailed the curse, a curse that had plagued the valley for centuries. It told of a vengeful spirit, a spirit wronged in life and seeking retribution in death. Rachel's heart sank as she read the journal, realizing that the curse was no mere legend. It was a malevolent force, a force that had claimed countless lives and was now fixated on her. She had become entangled in a supernatural web, a web that seemed impossible to escape. As the nights passed, the curse's grip on Rachel grew stronger. The apparitions drew nearer, their spectral hands reaching out to touch her, to pull her into the darkness. She could feel the malevolent force encroaching on her very soul, and she knew that she was running out of time. Finally, on a moonlit night, the curse revealed its origins. The vengeful spirit, wronged in life by those who had taken her land, had become a malevolent force, determined to exact her revenge on any who dared to enter the valley. Rachel had unwittingly become the target of the spirit's anger, and the curse was determined to claim her soul. As the curse tightened its grip, Rachel realized that she had been reckless in the face of supernatural warnings. She had ignored the wisdom of those who had come before her and now faced the consequences of her arrogance. The valley was a place of darkness and despair, and Rachel had become its prisoner. In the end, she had learned that some legends were more than mere superstition, that some curses were very real, and that the boundaries between the living and the dead were sometimes thinner than one could ever imagine. Rachel had become the latest victim of the curse, a chilling reminder of the consequences of ignoring the past. The forest's vengeance. Michael, an avid camper with a deep love for the great outdoors, had always sought solace in the wilderness. He believed in the healing power of nature, its beauty, and its ability to bring peace to the soul. But the sinister and twisted forest he ventured into on that fateful day was unlike any he had encountered before. This forest had an eerie, unnatural aura, a feeling of foreboding that seemed to seep from the very trees themselves. As Michael set up his campsite, he couldn't shake the unsettling sensation that the woods were watching him, that they held a deep and malevolent secret. The trees in this forest were different, twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching out like clawed fingers. They cast long, unnatural shadows that danced in the moonlight, and their leaves rustled with a sinister, almost mocking tone. Despite the ominous atmosphere, Michael believed that the forest's reputation was overblown. He had heard tales of a vengeful spirit that sought retribution for the destruction wrought by humans, but he dismissed them as mere folklore. He believed that the forest was simply a victim of superstition, and he was determined to prove it. As the night descended and the moon cast an eerie pallor over the forest, Michael settled by his campfire, confident that he would spend the night undisturbed. But the forest had other plans. The very ground beneath him seemed to tremble, and a chilling wind rustled through the trees. Michael heard whispers carried on the breeze, whispers that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the forest. "You should not have come," they murmured, a voice filled with anger and sorrow. Michael's heart quickened as he looked around, trying to locate the source of the whispers. But there was no one in sight, and the forest remained still and silent. It was as if the woods themselves were speaking to him, a voice of warning that he had chosen to ignore. As the night deepened, the forest seemed to come alive with a malevolent energy. Strange, ethereal lights flickered among the trees, casting an eerie, shifting glow. The ground trembled beneath Michael's feet, and he felt as though the forest itself was moving, closing in on him. The atmosphere grew oppressive, the air thick with a palpable sense of foreboding. It was then that Michael saw the first manifestation of the forest's vengeful spirit. It appeared as a spectral figure, its form translucent and shimmering. The spirit's eyes were filled with anger, its presence suffused with an otherworldly power. The spirit drew nearer, its movements graceful and eerie. It seemed to reach out to Michael, its fingers brushing against his skin with a cold, unnatural touch. He tried to back away, but the spirit's grip was unyielding, its presence overpowering. The spirit whispered words of anger and sorrow, recounting the countless trees that had been felled, the animals displaced, and the land desecrated by human hands. It spoke of the forest's suffering, of the pain inflicted upon it, and the spirit's desire for revenge. Michael, his heart pounding with fear, realized that the vengeful spirit was real, that the tales of the forest's retribution were more than mere folklore. He had become trapped in a realm where the boundaries between the living and the supernatural blurred, and he was now the target of the forest's anger. As the nights passed, the forest's vengeance grew relentless. The vengeful spirit pursued Michael with an unwavering determination, its presence becoming a constant torment. He could hear the whispers of the forest, the cries of the spirits of the land, and he began to understand the depth of the pain he had caused. Michael delved into the history of the forest, searching for answers to the spirit's anger. He discovered a tragic backstory that shed light on the forest's suffering. The land had once been a place of untouched beauty, a sanctuary for both nature and animals. But it had been ravaged by human hands, its pristine beauty marred by deforestation and pollution. The forest's vengeful spirit was the embodiment of the land's pain, a force seeking retribution for the atrocities committed against it. It was a voice of the environment, a voice of the earth itself, seeking to punish those who had shown disrespect for nature. As the spirit's relentless pursuit continued, Michael knew that he could no longer dismiss the forest's warnings. He had ignored the environmental consequences of his actions, and now he was facing the consequences of his recklessness. Determined to make amends, he conducted a series of rituals, hoping to appease the vengeful spirit and find a way to undo the damage done to the forest. Each night, he whispered words of acknowledgement and forgiveness, offering the spirit the release it so desperately sought. Finally, on a moonlit night, the forest's vengeful spirit began to fade away, its presence growing fainter until it was nothing but a distant memory. The forest, once plagued by anger and sorrow, grew silent, its twisted trees standing like sentinels in the night. Michael had witnessed the supernatural and come to understand that the boundaries between the living and the environment were sometimes thinner than one could ever imagine. The forest held secrets that defied the rational mind, and the vengeful spirit had taught him a powerful lesson about the consequences of disrespecting nature. In the end, he had learned that the environment could exact its own form of retribution, that the boundaries between the living and the natural world were sometimes blurred, and that the consequences of recklessness were not to be taken lightly. The forest's vengeance served as a chilling reminder of the importance of respecting the world around us and the environmental consequences of our actions. The unseen stalker in the heart of an ancient forest, where moonlight filtered through the dense canopy, Sarah, a seasoned camper, had set up her solitary campsite. The forest, shrouded in mystery, had always held a special place in her heart. The sound of rustling leaves and the gentle hoots of night owls were a familiar lullaby to her, a song that had lulled her to sleep countless times. But on this fateful night, the forest's embrace felt different. It was not the soothing presence she had grown accustomed to. Instead, it held a promise of terror, a sense that she was not alone in the wilderness. As Sarah settled in for the night, the solitude of the forest seemed to close in around her. The darkness was punctuated by the pale glow of the moon, casting eerie shadows that danced among the trees. She felt a growing unease, a sense that she was being watched from the shadows. Sarah had always been fearless, but as the night deepened, her confidence began to waver. She tried to dismiss the feeling of being observed as mere paranoia, but it lingered like a shadow on her consciousness. It was as if unseen eyes were fixed on her, tracking her every move. She peered into the inky darkness, searching for any sign of the source of her unease, but the forest remained silent. The only sound was the soft, whispering wind, carrying with it a feeling of foreboding. As she settled by the campfire, the warmth did little to ease her growing unease. The crackling flames cast long, flickering shadows that seemed to reach out like spectral fingers. She tried to concentrate on the sound of the fire, to drown out the sense of being watched. But then, a small, unsettling noise broke the silence. It was a soft, almost imperceptible rustling, the sound of something moving in the underbrush. Sarah's heart quickened, and she trained her gaze on the dark expanse of the forest. She saw nothing, but the sense of an unseen presence grew stronger. The feeling of being watched was now a tangible weight on her shoulders, a force that seemed to invade her very soul. Desperate to reassure herself, Sarah scanned the forest once more, her flashlight cutting through the shadows. And then she saw it. A pair of pale, ghostly eyes staring back at her from the darkness. The eyes belonged to a creature, a dark silhouette that melted into the obscurity of the forest. It was no ordinary animal, and Sarah knew that it was something more sinister. It watched her with a malevolent, almost mocking gaze, as if it reveled in her fear. She attempted to communicate with the intruder, but her words were met with silence. The creature remained still, its eyes fixed on her. It was an eerie standoff, a confrontation between Sarah and the unseen stalker. As the night wore on, the unseen stalker's presence did not wane. It continued to watch, to observe, and to unsettle. Sarah's paranoia grew with each passing moment, and she began to feel as though the forest had become a prison. The campfire, once a source of comfort, now cast long, grotesque shadows that danced around her. She could hear the creature's soft movements in the darkness, its presence an unrelenting reminder of her vulnerability. Determined to confront the stalker, Sarah ventured further into the forest, her flashlight piercing the inky blackness. But the unseen presence remained just beyond her reach, its eerie eyes following her every move. As dawn approached, Sarah was left with a growing sense of dread. The night had been a nightmarish ordeal, a relentless torment of being watched, of being invaded. She knew that she could not stay in the forest any longer, that the unseen stalker had claimed the solitude that was once hers. Desperate for answers, she conducted a thorough search of the forest, determined to uncover the stalker's identity. And then, hidden beneath a tangle of branches and leaves, she found it. A small, worn diary lay hidden in the underbrush, its pages filled with the ramblings of a deranged mind. It spoke of an obsession, an insatiable desire to watch, to observe, to invade the lives of others. It was the diary of the unseen stalker, a testament to its twisted desires. As Sarah read the diary, the horrifying truth became clear. The stalker had been a hermit, a recluse who had taken refuge in the forest to escape the chaos of the world. But the solitude had driven the hermit to madness, and he had become a twisted voyeur, a creature that found pleasure in invading the lives of others. The diary detailed Sarah's every move, her actions, her fears, and her growing sense of unease. It was a chilling record of her torment, a reminder that the unseen stalker had been watching her from the shadows. In the end, the forest's vengeance was not supernatural, but a very real and human one. The unseen stalker had invaded Sarah's privacy, had claimed her solitude as its own, and had left her with a chilling reminder of the consequences of trespassing on someone's peace. The forest remained an eerie, desolate place, but Sarah had learned a valuable lesson about the boundaries between solitude and invasion, about the consequences of disregarding someone's personal space. The unseen stalker's malevolent presence served as a stark reminder that even in the depths of the wilderness, one could never truly escape the reach of another. The sinister campfire tales. Daniel had always been an adventurous soul, seeking the thrill of the unknown. He often ventured into the wilderness, with nothing but the stars above and the campfire's crackling flames for company. But on this stormy, starless night, the remote campsite felt different, as if the very air crackled with an ominous energy. As the rain pelted down and the thunder rumbled in the distance, Daniel huddled close to his campfire. He had always been a master storyteller, and he relished the opportunity to regale his camping companions with chilling tales of the supernatural. But as the storm raged on, he decided to tell a different kind of story, one that would blur the line between fiction and reality. He began to speak of a cursed book, a tome filled with malevolent tales that could summon the characters and creatures from its pages. The campfire's glow illuminated his face, casting eerie shadows that danced in the night. Daniel described the cursed book's pages, their words written in an ancient, incomprehensible script. He spoke of the characters and creatures that had come to life, wreaking havoc on the world of their creator. As the stories poured from his lips, he saw a subtle shift in the atmosphere around him. The stormy night seemed to grow even darker, as if the very darkness were closing in. The campfire's flames flickered in response to his words, casting haunting, elongated shadows. Just as he began to question the wisdom of his storytelling, he heard a sound that froze his blood. It was a soft, eerie whisper carried on the wind. The words were the same as those he had just described, a chilling echo of his tale. But there was no one else at the campsite. The voices seemed to emanate from the very darkness itself. Daniel's heart quickened as he realized that the stories he had told were no longer confined to the realm of fiction. They had become a nightmarish reality. He tried to shake off the feeling of dread, to convince himself that it was mere coincidence. But as he continued his tale, the campfire's flames grew more erratic, their light casting strange, unnatural shapes on the ground. The whispering voices continued, their words becoming more distinct, more haunting. They spoke of the cursed book and the malevolent tales it contained. They described the characters and creatures that had come to life, their dark intentions and insatiable hunger for human souls. The campfire's flames danced in time with the voices, their erratic movements reflecting the story's growing intensity. Daniel felt as though he had opened a door to a realm of darkness, and the creatures from his tales were now crossing over into his world. As the night wore on, the atmosphere around him grew even more surreal. He saw movement in the shadows, subtle, sinister figures that seemed to lurk just beyond the campfire's glow. The creatures from his stories were coming to life, their forms taking shape in the darkness. Daniel realized that he had conjured the very nightmares he had described, that the power of his storytelling had brought them to life. The encroachment of the nightmarish characters continued, their eyes fixed on him with a hunger that sent a shiver down his spine. Desperate to put an end to the nightmare, Daniel tried to change the direction of his tales. He spoke of heroes who would vanquish the dark forces, of spells and incantations that would banish the malevolent creatures back into the cursed book. But his words had little effect. The creatures continued to draw closer, their forms growing more distinct, more menacing. It was as if the campsite had become a battleground, a place where fiction and reality collided. The climax of his tales approached, and the campsite was consumed by a surreal and chilling atmosphere. The storm raged on, the wind howling like a chorus of the damned, and the creatures from his stories drew near, their presence a constant torment. As the final words of his tales left his lips, the campfire's flames flared to life, their light blinding in its intensity. And then, with a deafening roar, the creatures were gone. They vanished into the night, their eerie whispers fading into silence. The campsite returned to its desolate, stormy state, the atmosphere still heavy with an ominous energy. Daniel realized that the power of his storytelling had summoned the creatures and characters from his tales, but it had also banished them back into the world of fiction. The campfire's flames danced in the night, casting haunting, elongated shadows that seemed to mock him. The storm raged on, its fury unabated, and the campsite felt like a place of surreal and nightmarish terror. Daniel had learned a powerful lesson about the consequences of toying with the supernatural, about the power of storytelling and the thin line between fiction and reality. He had conjured his own nightmares and witnessed the blurring of the boundaries between the two worlds. As he huddled by the campfire, the eerie, surreal atmosphere still clinging to the night, he knew that he had ventured into a realm of darkness that defied explanation. The sinister campfire tales had become a chilling reality, a reminder that the power of storytelling could bring both wonder and terror, and that the consequences of playing with the supernatural were not to be taken lightly. The forgotten ritual, the ancient woods had always held an allure for Emma, a sense of mystery that beckoned her deeper into their depths. She was a curious adventurer, drawn to the stories of the past, and her latest journey had led her to an eerie and cursed camping ground. The forest was a realm of shadows and secrets, with trees that seemed to whisper forbidden knowledge. Sinister symbols were etched into their bark, markings that spoke of a malevolent force bound to the land. Emma couldn't resist the temptation to explore, to uncover the truth behind the forest's dark history. As she ventured deeper into the woods, the air grew heavy with an oppressive sense of foreboding. The sinister symbols on the trees seemed to watch her, their presence an unspoken warning. But Emma's curiosity was relentless, and she pressed on. It was beneath a canopy of twisted, gnarled trees that she made her discovery. A small, worn book lay hidden in the underbrush, its pages filled with cryptic incantations and descriptions of a forbidden ritual. The book was a testament to a dark and ancient knowledge, a knowledge that should have remained buried. Emma's curiosity got the better of her, and she couldn't resist the urge to perform the ritual. She recited the incantations, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and fascination. The ritual called for the lighting of a black candle, and as its flickering flame illuminated the pages, a sense of dread washed over her. The ground beneath her trembled, and the air seemed to thicken with a malevolent energy. She knew that she had unleashed a force beyond her comprehension, a force that sought to claim her soul. As the night deepened, the camping ground became a place of terror. Strange, supernatural occurrences began to unfold. Shadows danced among the trees, their forms shifting and contorting in the moonlight. Sinister whispers filled the air, their words incomprehensible, but their intent unmistakable. The sinister symbols etched into the trees glowed with an eerie, otherworldly light, their presence a constant reminder of the malevolent force that had been awakened. Emma could feel its eyes on her, an unseen presence that watched and waited, desperate to unravel the curse that she had unwittingly unleashed. Emma delved into the book's pages once more, searching for a way to reverse the ritual. But the knowledge was as dark as the forest itself, and there was no turning back. As the nights passed, the supernatural occurrences escalated. Emma was tormented by nightmarish visions, her dreams a realm of horror and despair. The malevolent force seemed to grow stronger, its presence a constant torment. The camping ground had become a realm of ritualistic horror, a place where the boundaries between the living and the supernatural blurred. Emma felt as though she had ventured into a world of darkness, a world where ancient curses held sway. In her quest for answers, Emma uncovered a chilling revelation about the curse's origins. The forest had once been a place of dark rituals, a site where unspeakable acts had been committed in the name of forbidden knowledge. The malevolent force had been bound to the land, a guardian of the cursed knowledge. As the malevolent force closed in on her, Emma knew that her curiosity had led her to a perilous crossroads. She had meddled with ancient, forbidden knowledge, and now she was paying the price. The curse sought to claim her soul, to make her a part of the dark history of the forest. Desperate to escape her nightmarish fate, Emma made a final, desperate attempt to reverse the ritual. She recited the incantations once more, hoping against hope that it would be enough to banish the malevolent force. The ground trembled, and the air grew thick with tension as she lit the black candle. The flames flickered, casting eerie shadows on the camping ground. But this time, there was no malevolent force to answer the call. As the night grew still and the sinister symbols on the trees faded, Emma knew that the curse had been broken. The malevolent force had been banished, and the forest had returned to its sinister, ancient slumber. Emma had learned a powerful lesson about the consequences of curiosity, about the danger of meddling with forbidden knowledge. The forgotten ritual had been a nightmarish journey into a world of darkness, a world where ancient curses held sway. The camping ground remained a place of mystery and malevolence, a testament to the power of the past. Emma had narrowly escaped the clutches of the malevolent force, and as she left the forest behind, she knew that the boundaries between the living and the supernatural were thinner than one could ever imagine. The forgotten ritual served as a chilling reminder of the consequences of toying with the dark and ancient forces that dwelled in the shadows.